Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, September 11th. And Mr. Atkins, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Being that today is a very
somber
day in our country's history, let's take a few moments of silence and just remember our first responders and our citizens that were involved in this tragedy of 9/11.
Threat has been detected.
Thank you. With that, I'll ask for an approval of the consent agenda and the regular agenda. Just the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we'll just run through the consent agenda, or actually we'll go through, I'm sorry, we're on Tuesday's agenda. We're going to go to the swearing in. I think I have the right agenda. Mr. Lehman? Okay.
You're back on track.
Okay. Okay, with that, Chief, would you like to come forward? Good evening.
Well, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always a good day when I can bring one of our newest officers in front of the board and introduce him to you so you can put a name to the face. Our newest officer is Officer Devin Seeley. Officer Seeley, if you please come up here. Officer Seeley went to Kersley High School, Mott Community College. We got his associate's degree. Went to the Lurda Academy, or the Flint Academy here in Genesee County, and spent some time in Franklin with as a reserve officer. Officer Seeley, we've been doing so many interviews to try to get quality candidates into our department and join our team. When we find one, we know we have it right away, and that's what it was when we were interviewing Officer Seeley. He stood out from everyone else that we interviewed. Officer Seeley has been with us for a couple months already. He is in what we call the shadow phase of our FTO, our Field Training Officer Program. So he is running the show with his FTO or Field Training Officer with him. He has 4 more days in the training card, and then he will be out on the streets in the Great Township serving our residents.
Sorry.
Serving our residents solo. So he is nearing completion of his training phase with us. So with him today, his mom and dad are here, and his girlfriend Brooke. You want to do the swearing in before the pinning, or would you like to do the pinning first?
Swear 'em in first and then the pinning. That's
Sounds
the
good.
way I've learned it.
Oh, must be right.
We're going to ask you, Mr. Seeley, to stand right next to the podium facing the audience. Okay. You want to back up just a little bit? Clerk Lane will swear you in.
Will you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Michigan, the Charter of Grand Blanc Township as police officer for Grand Blanc Township, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations. Now, you get
Boy, he must be good. You didn't have him sign in blood like you normally do.
Brooke, could you please
Thank
come
you.
up? One of the things we do to finalize the ceremony is have the officer's badge is his shield, and we have someone that the officer's choosing come and pin the badge on the officer. And Officer Seeley chose his girlfriend Brooke to do that. Brooke, if you will, please.
Does he have his vest on underneath so she doesn't have to
We're told
worry
find
about
out. Just in case.
That's how you get the blood.
That's the toughness test.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Keep yourself safe.
Congratulations.
Yes, good luck, sir.
Welcome. Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
We're always proud of the great things we hear about our Grand Blanc Township Police. I was at a neighborhood association meeting last night, and the residents of Ottawa Hills really praised up our police department. Anything that they've had go on in their neighborhood, it's been taken care of immediately, and had a number of residents come forward to tell the chief that. So
It's also,
Sorry?
it's also nice, Mr. Supervisor, for his brother police officers to come in and support him at this particular time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, with that, we will move to public comment. So start over on the left side of the room. See if any of our department directors would like to comment. And then moving towards the back of the room.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Christian.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. I just want to take a few minutes to introduce myself. My name is Chris Christensen. I'm a local resident. I live in Grand Blanc Township, and I'm running for Circuit Court Judge. I see a lot of familiar faces, so that makes it a lot easier. Some of the other townships and cities I go to, I don't know so many people, so that makes it a lot better. Just briefly, I see you guys have a full agenda. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in the city of Flint, went to Flint Community Schools, started my practice here in Genesee County. I've been here for my whole entire 18 years. I do an awful lot of circuit court work. I've had the opportunity to take very complex cases all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court on a mortgage foreclosure case that I won a split decision against some of the largest banks in our state. But I also handle regular work. I do an awful lot of criminal defense and real estate and business litigation. So I just want to introduce myself. If you guys don't mind, I have a couple of little brochures I'll leave if you guys want to learn a little more about me, and I'd look forward to having some support this November. So thank you.
Thank you very
I'll
much.
leave it over here with Mr. Laddie.
For our folks' information, Mr. Christensen did a really nice job in supporting our fire millage. He was out there during the food truck event and passing out lit with me. And Chris, I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing on with public comment. Anybody else on this side of the room? Otherwise, we'll move to the back row. Mr. Earp, good evening.
Good evening. Ed Earp, 721 Porter Road. I see we have a lot on our agenda for tonight and Thursday, so I hope you get through it. Could be some long evenings. I'd like to address this on a procedural basis, okay? There's a Parks and Rec letter here, but I don't want to zero in on just Parks and Recs. This is about, I'd say this about any department. We have this letter here that says we have a single source provider. Well, when we talk about single source provider for playscape surfacing, there's a lot of providers in the country to do that, for surfacing. They might not have soft surface or a Duralast or whatever they call it, but there's plenty of playscape surfaces and tiles. So there's all kinds of this. I took a brief while to take a look at it and search it. So I really think that procedurally, you should always get 3 bids on something. There's all types of surfaces. Don't have to be tile. A city doesn't have that problem. They have wood chips. There's all kinds of surfaces we can do. I also, when I was researching this thing a little bit, through the types of playscape surfaces you have, the tiles, they had said that if money's no option, that's the way to go. Well, this is my tax money, so I want it to be an option. But I want to do this. I do this for any department that's doing this. There is no single source, as far as I'm concerned. The other thing is, I noticed that the area and facility subcommittee reviewed this project. I know when you do have subcommittees, they're listed on your agendas. I go to Parks and Recs and I don't see people's names on subcommittees. I wonder who these people are. It's not that important, but we should know. And also, they want this voted on here at the township board level before it's voted on at the Park and Recreation Commission. I think that's wrong. I think that it should follow a procedure. They come to you after they've decided what they want. And when you really look at it, your next meeting, this board's meeting is on the 25th. Their board meeting is on the 20th. There's only 3 working days we're talking about eliminating here. Unless something else is going on that I don't know about. So, well, I'll leave it at that. I mean, it's procedure we're talking about here. It's just procedure. It'd be for any department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Okay. That wraps up our agenda pretty much for our Tuesday, and we'll move on now to review the Township Board agenda for Thursday.
No.
No,
We have the presentation from Director Lloyd, Mr. Supervisor.
Sorry. Mr. Lloyd?
I didn't want you to hold him over till Thursday. He'd be tired.
I apologize. I'm in a hurry to get to that agenda.
All right, I understand. I think I'm going to be able to help you with that because I don't have to take too much of your time.
That's fine. It's good. Give it a second. It'll come up. Right, Robbie?
Somebody's there first.
All right, that should pop up. Did you hit 3, please, sir?
Yes.
You did?
It just,
All right.
it came up for a second, so there it is. That's your screen? I'm
Well,
trying.
you would think it would be.
Are you in PowerPoint?
Yes.
Exit out of the play portion of PowerPoint and go back to,
I'll just reload it.
yes.
See what happens.
So we had the Taste of Grand Blanc this evening at the Chamber of Commerce, held at Woodfield.
Go.
Yes, very nice event, and
There we go.
this week we have the Ally
You
Challenge,
need
so
to stand close, Robbie. Thank you.
lots of activities in Grand Blanc Township this week.
Sorry about the delay, folks, but we're on our way now. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight and talk to you a little bit about code enforcement. We're pretty proud of the efforts and a lot of the accomplishments, and the idea tonight is to give you good folks an idea of what we do, how we do it, and what that means. And so I want to do that tonight, and if there's any questions at any time, please feel free to ask. I've given you a copy of this presentation, so help yourselves to duplicating it. But what I want to walk you through tonight is the complaint process, kind of from the beginning to the end. And what happens is we'll either get a phone call, we'll get an email, we'll go see something in person, or we'll get it through this complaint form process. And what that means is that folks will go online, they'll fill the application materials out for the complaint, and then they'll submit it. Here's basically what they'll do. If you look at the image on the left, which is the township's homepage, you'll see that highlighted area near the bottom left that says complaint form. And what happens, you go there, you click it, and then it opens the image on the right. And that's a fillable and submittable online form that simply requires somebody to go in, fill out the information, identify the location and the incident, if you will, the complaint, and then hit submit. And when they do that, it goes into our system, and it is then picked up by one of our code enforcement staff. It actually goes directly to Amy Wilkinson. And then once she gets that, she inputs that data into the system. And here's the page that she would be using to input the data into the system. And when I say system, this is a program that the township has and has had for quite a long time. This allows us to manage and track and send letters out of here, input and load up images. This is where we save all the documentation that If we're lucky, we'll never have to, but if we do have to, we go back to and use that to provide information for the attorney and the attorney's office in the event an item goes to court. So this is where we maintain the majority of our information once we go out and do those inspections. And when we do that, and that we send out a letter, and I'll show you an example of that, we send out a letter once we determine that there actually is a violation. We send a letter out to the property owner, unless if it's something we see when we're out there, we'll talk to them and try to help resolve it. We usually take the least adversarial approach that we possibly can. And so we send a letter out and let them know that we've identified a violation, let them know what that violation is, and then give them 10 days to get back to us and let us know what their circumstances are, how long until they're going to fix it, or whatever the circumstances might be. They may want to argue and say they don't believe that that's a violation, or whatever the case is. And so we hear them out and we try our hardest to explain to them and hopefully give them the opportunity to understand what the circumstances are. And so once we send that letter out, and here's a sample of what that letter would look like that ends up going to folks. Now, I should point out that I added the Blanc Township logo in the bottom just to keep all the signs consistent, and continue to use our logo as much as possible. That would not be on a normal letter that we would send out. So this is a letter. It basically will describe, as it says here, here's the section of the ordinance, what the violation is. It gives a review of that section, identifies the problem, lets folks know what the process is and how and what to do to communicate back to the township's code enforcement staff. And once the code enforcement officer follows up on that, and if the property is still non-compliant, then what we end up doing is sending out another letter to the homeowner, advising them that this again is a problem. And then when we go, oh, sure, sir.
Not to interrupt you,
Yeah.
Mark. Hey, on that letter, I noticed, one of the sentences there, be advised that this is a violation of the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code. So that's a code that we subscribe to?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the township has adopted all the uniform codes, and those are generally run through, and they come from, they're an international code, so they're applied across the nation. Now, we used to do the Michigan codes, now we do the international codes.
So I'm familiar, like we pass every once in a while, we say, hey, we're going to make sure we update, but do we do that with this as well?
We do, and I think what you may be noticing is 2015 doesn't seem exactly current, but the way that the code authority releases these codes, they always are about 3 years behind. And so believe it or not, that's probably the most current version of that code. And by the way, our ordinances, if there's a new edition that comes out, our ordinances have by reference adopted them as well. So that's why that 2015 looks a little odd.
Okay. I'm just wondering, so some communities seem to have even tougher codes, than maybe we do. You go up to Mackinac Island, for example, and they even regulate what color your house can be, right?
True.
I don't know if that's code that does that, or that's,
Has to be a law if we're going to enforce it.
I would imagine Frankenmuth probably has some pretty stringent codes because they want to keep, their, motif going or whatever.
We have an image, if you will.
So I'm just wondering, so not everybody just follows this 2015 International Property Maintenance Code. Some say, hey, we're going to go a little bit beyond that.
It's different.
Is
that code is itself. It doesn't get amended or modified by anybody. You can't unless you go through a pretty significant process to do that. And then it can't be any more strict than that code. The only way you can do that is through your own design code elements and things of that nature that you might incorporate it into your zoning ordinance or however else you would do it, but you wouldn't do it through those building codes. Building codes for the structural components of things.
Let me throw out just one, and this isn't something that it's a complaint that occasionally that I hear. We need something that says that you can't put out your garbage cans, 3 days in advance, and you can't leave them there for a week after they pick them up. Right now, I don't think we have any code that says you can't put your garbage cans out for a week. And there's probably nothing in the International Property Maintenance Code. But let's say that was a huge problem and we wanted to do something about it. We could adopt a code that would, address that issue.
Sure.
Even though it might not be part of this international code.
Doesn't need to be. It's a different issue. That's actually, controlling and maintaining your own rights of way, particularly if they're putting it out on the street or however you would do it. Now, I would defer that issue to the township attorney because that could become quite a challenge. It would need to have
Yeah.
some.
And I'm not,
analysis.
I'm just using that as
No, and that's
a
fine.
sample, it's not anything that I'm proposing or suggesting, so.
But
I don't
if we
want-
were
I
to
don't
do
want-
that-
I don't wanna make headlines in the Grand Blanc View, that I'm promoting that.
With your hypothetical, which I realize is nowhere, is not intended as a realistic development. If we had an ordinance like that, we'd be able to enforce that ordinance. There could be violations that are also a violation of the property maintenance code. And we might even, I'm trying to remember, we at various times have had what we call the blight ordinance, which would handle things a little more specifically than the property maintenance code does. But you could get a ticket for all three of those things. You could also have a violation of a zoning ordinance. So we can layer these things if we need to. But it all depends
Okay.
really on how
Stringent we wanna be.
stringent you want to be and what kind of
Right,
things you want to do.
okay. No, I was just curious how that fit in with this international guide.
Yeah, they're separate. You know, we
Okay.
have a whole set of those, probably 7 different code books: mechanical, plumbing, electrical, building, residential, property maintenance, all that.
Okay,
Question. I got a question.
sure, Mr. Atkins.
Well, based off that, if a citizen complaint form comes in and it does not fit into a specific code violation, are you compiling those to see if maybe there is some common complaints that we should look at?
Well, let me get through this, because I think I can answer that question at the end in a
Okay.
I think in a pretty effective way.
Okay.
So please just bear with me on that. Sir?
Yes, at the bottom of page, is that one, the complaint process?
Yes.
At that bottom of the page, okay? The complaint is regarding mowing.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, I know that what we currently have is not sufficient. I know that. And let me prove to you, it's not sufficient. Because you have stated it down here. After 10 days, CEO officer follow up.
Right.
Well, let me give you a fact. How tall you think grass will be after 10 days?
That tall.
The what?
That tall.
You
That
mean-
much taller. I can't, I don't know.
Well, I can tell you,
In,
on the average, it would be a hayfield.
in 10 days?
Yes, absolutely,
All right.
on the average.
Okay.
So what I'm saying, that this doesn't fit properly into mowing your lawn if you would like to see your neighbor's lawn mowed. Okay, it's already, what's the ordinance, 10 inches?
8.
8, it's already 8 inches.
So it's gonna be 16 or more.
That's my point. Thank you.
Well, if I might, and Mr. Laddie, please just jump right in, either support me or tell me to knock it off. But we have to give them due process. We can't simply go out and require that overnight. We identify the problem and we get in touch with them, usually before it, it doesn't always have to be beyond 8 inches. We know it's going there or it's a chronic problem. We'll let them know in advance, but we have to provide some level of due process. And my sense, because I'm not a student of the law, but my sense is that there's been past cases and it's been determined that 10 days is sort of a standard, because we use that in a number of other areas as well.
But
But maybe Mr. Laddie can
Well,
address that.
the other part of this process is we have an obligation to make sure the property owner knows there's a violation and give them a reasonable time to cure it. Now, I'll leave to you what you think is reasonable time, but it's very often difficult to get a hold of a property owner personally. And then sometimes, I don't know if you guys are posting on the door violations or if you're mailing violations. I know the one thing we can't do is go out and mow somebody's lawn, put it on their tax bill without having them receive notice, either again by mailing personally or by posting. And so if you want to shorten up the amount of time where once somebody's been notified that you give them, that's something that we could explore. But that period of time of notice is not something we can shortchange. And it also, unfortunately, is something that moves sometimes, because you have property owners or tenants or people just occupying the home. So that's a little bit trickier than it sounds.
I am familiar in that on the 10th day, or after that 10-day waiting period, the lawn mowing service is out there as soon as our ordinance allows you to
Right.
start mowing grass. They're at that site. But we can talk about that 10-day period. I didn't know that was
We could.
negotiable, but
We could, and I didn't either. It would have to be reasonable, and we'd have to look at what that means.
But I guess when you say homeowner, let me be sort of specific about what I mean.
Okay.
Because it's sort of a broad term when you say homeowner. Because the homeowner could live in New York City.
Right.
That's the point, I think.
Okay. My thought is someone that's immediately occupying the home is responsible for making sure that the lawn is mowed.
Well, and that's a good point. We'll give violations to owners or occupants. It gets a little bit tricky when you have, let's say you have an occupant, then you have the owner of the property is in some other location and doesn't get notification. Where it gets tricky is when we're taking amounts that we've assessed for the cost of mowing and put it on the tax roll. Because that person in New York might not know that they had a violation, their tenant might have done something in violation of the lease, and it starts this chain of
Yeah.
problem. And so we are giving people notice, we're giving owners and occupants notice, and we're holding occupants responsible for immediate action. But again, there are some of the intricate due process issues that we sometimes run into, with an example you just gave, that are always gonna be a little bit of a struggle.
do we notify both the homeowner and the occupant?
And ultimately, at the end of the day, as often as we do get compliance by that tenant who might be living there or renting or doing whatever the case is, ultimately, it is responsibility of the property owner. And if they have an agreement between each other that says tenant shall be responsible for mowing the yard, that's a civil matter between them. But our cure, if you will, is to go ultimately to the property owner. We work real hard with the tenants, and we get a lot of compliance, and I'll talk a little bit about that near the end. But we go ultimately to the owner.
But not to
'Cause
belabor
that's
this, we have no idea whether it's a rental.
We don't know the terms of those agreements, those leases, those
But we don't
contracts.
even know if it's a rental property.
Yeah, that's right.
So how do we know?
We send it to the house as well. We look up on the rolls if the house address is different than the owner address.
Okay,
House
can we
gets
send
one.
it to both?
Owner
Okay.
gets
All
The
right.
tax bill goes to the owner,
Right.
which is not necessarily at the house.
Ms. Lane?
I was surprised tonight to learn that we have to send out 2 letters, because previously it was 1 letter, 10 days notice, followed by the inspection by the code enforcement officer again. I didn't know it was a total of 20 days because you're sending out 2 letters.
Well, in these instances, we send them out immediately. In the instance of what you're talking about, we do give 2 20-day periods for general code enforcement
2 10-day, you
compliance.
mean.
2 10 days, what did I say?
2 20-day.
Excuse me, 2 10 days, and we do the 1 10-day for the mowing.
All right, thank you.
So it is 2 10-day for.
Yeah,
No.
and I'll get to that next step
Okay,
here.
all right.
You know, Mark, one thing we haven't mentioned here, and let me mention this. This is a factual thing that happened. If you're trying to sell your home and someone lives next door to you, just, I'm gonna exaggerate a little, okay? And the grass is 16 inches high. That's gonna affect your home property
Sure.
value.
That's right.
You know that, right?
Yes.
That's why you better call when it's 8 inches.
And we do get a phone call or 2 on occasion from those folks who are looking to sell their house, who has a neighbor around who's not necessarily taking good care of their property for just that reason. It happens.
So how do you handle that, I guess?
Same
Well,
way.
just the same way. We still have the same process. Now, don't get me wrong, we send a letter out. There's no doubt about it, and we send another one out. But we also spend time communicating and conversing with folks. I mean, there's a very personal approach here that you're fortunate enough to have the kind of staff people who have great relationships with people. I mean, they establish them. They're very unoffensive when they approach folks and talk to them. And they do a great job of working a lot of these things out well in advance of this whole process. I'm just letting you know globally, here's our process. This is how it has to work. And I'm going to show you something here very soon. And you guys just keep stopping me from getting there, but I'm going to get there
All right,
anyway.
we're gonna let Mark talk. Let's let Mark,
so-
we'll hold off on questions till.
No, I'm
Mark
teasing,
is,
of course.
But Mark-
But you're all talking about kind of that end result here, and I do want to be able to get to that.
All right,
But Mark?
Yes.
No, just teasing.
go ahead, Mark. Well, we're gonna hold off questions for a little bit here.
I want to talk about the Perry House.
So, after that first 10 days, we go out and we hang one of these on their door if need be. You are asking whether or not we visit the site. We do. We send another letter, but we also do this because we need to make sure we're getting our word of God. We have an absolute obligation, if we end up in court, to have done everything we can to provide that owner with information, to provide due process, to do all these things. So the staff that you have in your code enforcement department do an excellent job of compiling that data, keeping it in place, and being prepared to present that to the attorney's office in the event it ever needs to get to that point. So this is kind of our final notice, as it says there. And so from there, we issue a citation. Once we put that notice on the board, on the door, we tell them how long they have. And if it hasn't been resolved by that time, then we get a little, let's say, more serious about it, and we issue a citation. They get a citation, and that citation requires them to go to court. This is not a dollar citation. This is a citation to show in court. And so that's when Mr. Laddie gets involved. He's provided with the information. We establish the case. I can't speak to all the things that Mr. Laddie has to do. I just know that when he needs things from us, we work real hard to make sure we have them. If he needs more pictures, we get out and go get them. If there's something missing that he identifies, we make sure that we get that. And that is ultimately, that's the end of it. Well, what ends up happening when you get to that case is that if we do that, then maybe the matter gets decided by a judge. But here's the thing that I wanted to point out, and I think this is really pretty impressive, that 98.5% of our problems get resolved administratively. We take care of all that internally. So the number that you were talking about, how many do we have? Do we keep that and do we compile those? There's very few that really happen. Almost nothing that we do isn't covered by a code. I haven't seen anything yet that's come in. I just haven't.
Brush piles.
Pardon?
The brush piles in the backyard that I was telling you about.
Well, that's trash and debris. You know, there's things, I mean, there's a code section that can cover pretty much anything. It just depends on how you apply it. Now, we do fine-tune things and we adjust as we may need to if we discover issues. But generally speaking, 98.5% of the cases get settled or taken care of, if you will, closed. And the things that are remaining end up in the courtroom. So here's some of those numbers. Up to now, we've had 620 open cases since January 1st of just this year alone. So, you know, that's a pretty high number, as you can imagine. So you've got a pretty busy group of folks out there running around, receiving complaints, responding to them, dealing with the things that they need to deal with. 477 of them thus far this year have been closed. So we've taken in 78, 60 of them in a month, 60 of them are open, 18. So we generally have 18 or so that are still floating in that 10 to 10 day time period. So we still have, that's that group that are not closed, that are open cases that are at any given time. The remainder is still the difference between those two. So those are going to float through each month. They're just going to go, and at the end of the day, here's how that works out. I should point out how many signs that folks have gathered over this year so far too. It's almost 700 that they've pulled out of the right-of-way and or off poles and stuff. So, you know, that's a significant amount of clutter being removed from the township on a daily basis. You could tell there's almost 90 of them get taken down a month. So more than that a day, because we only work a couple days, or, you know, four or 5 days a week. So it's a
Mark,
good number.
one of the things that I'm not sure with their new website or what have you, if we're going to be able to do, but
Yeah.
the way that I get complaints from residents is I usually get a text message with a photo or a couple of photos that they send me a picture of their neighbor's backyard that they have junk vehicle or
Right.
or hey, look at this, you know, garbage or whatever, and they forward that to me. If there were some way that we can incorporate, you know, being able to send something from a cell phone or with our new website that that they can actually submit these things from their cell phone, I think would be very customer friendly to our residents, because not everybody wants to go back home and go to a form and fill it out on their computer. But even if it was a check-off thing of what, you know, what their complaint is, so that they can check them off and they can hopefully pull over on the side of the road and do this from their cell phone as opposed to driving and doing it. But I think on the one hand, I mean, I think, you know, people move to Grand Blanc because we do maintain high standards, right, sure, and we want to respond, but we also want to have these things documented instead of right, just calling in and saying, hey, you know, I need you to do this.
Well, when we get a call in, we do fill out a form and it goes into the system. So
Mhm.
it's not as if a phone call or
Okay.
even an in-person conversation still doesn't get,
Right.
logged and tracked.
Mm-hmm.
But I think your point about maybe other forms of media, and maybe Dennis can speak a little bit to the new, I know we're working on a new webpage and it's intended to
Mhm.
really kind of raise the stakes a little bit and give us some more tools. And I would imagine this would be one of many.
Mr. Lemona?
So the board approved, if you recall, about a month ago, Robbie, does that ring a bell? When we, in addition to the modules for what we're doing with our website redesign, actually, trustee Mansford asked a question about revise and why we had that payment going to revise. That actually was to do the module that we just discussed. It is going to be on our website, ultimately mobile based so that somebody can still access it from their phone and go, and it's going to be a reporting portal. So it's not just because you have your neighbor's grass is too long, or you want to know about a brush pile or a car in a driveway, but it's reporting. You could report a pothole, you could report a broken power pole in your neighborhood. There's, again, for things that aren't necessarily code enforcement, but it's a report to the township about something that's going on, that suspicious activity. We'd prefer they called dispatch if they're concerned, rather than send that in. But we'll have that highlighted on there, like what it's for, what it isn't for, but it's really a reporting portal. We paid the additional module, the fee for the module for our programmers to create that. It will be part of our website.
Okay.
And that's why we want to encourage, you bring up a good point. You get a text message from somebody that says, dear Board of Trustee member, here's a problem I have on the street that I drive on every day, and can you fix it for me? We're going to continue to encourage you to follow that process. We'll direct them to the website, because while they may have a personal relationship with you and they think, well, I'll just contact the supervisor or Board of Trustees member, because then that'll get that problem taken care of. You guys send it, you say, well, I'll send it, I'll forward it to code enforcement. You send it to Amy, or you bump into Steve in the hallway and you say, Steve, here's an issue and I want you to be aware of it. We don't have a log created, right? I mean, maybe they'll get one started, maybe they'll fill it out, but that's why we want to encourage everybody to use the same process. Great, jump on our website. There's a portal on there that you're going to want to fill out that form and submit it. Especially with the new website, because when they hit what the issue is, there's boxes for them to check about what the issue is, and when they hit submit, it's going to go to the right person. It creates a log, number one, that we can follow up and make sure that we did 24-hour turnaround time on at least investigated or started the process moving. But it also goes to the right person so that we know that it's logged and it's moving.
Right.
And that's important. So when you guys get those calls, as tempting as it may be to try to help a neighbor or help a friend, it's always better to follow our process, which is to get it through that, especially with our new website redesign. So I'm glad you guys talked about it, because this thing's going to be really cool. It's something that we invested in just for that very fact that it's about letting us know what's going on. There's something going on there. Like I said, potholes. Well, we don't really deal with road potholes, but if you can give it to us, we can direct that to the appropriate, to the road commission, so that they're aware of it through the reporting portal off our website. It's going to be a huge improvement over our ability to interact directly with concerns that the public has.
Very good. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Lloyd, one of the things that happened recently that I had more concern about than just mowing lawns was over by East Middle School. There was a building that used to be part of an association that was sold off to be used as a doctor's office and wasn't approved. And I had to let you know that there were 2 large windows with broken glass that were dangerous, and the building was open. And I am asking if there is some way that we can expedite that kind of situation. Mowing is not a public hazard, but being close to a school and in a subdivision, broken glass and buildings that can be, teenagers go into wherever they can get in. And so if there's a way to expedite a public safety issue like that, I would like it investigated so that no one is injured, because I think there'd be more liability for the township. And that process took almost a month.
Yeah, I think we could set something up that'd be very similar to when we pick up the phone and call the company that mows the yards. So we can look into that.
Thank you.
Sure. If, I got a couple of quick seconds and then I'm done. I did want to point out that if you look at the number up here, 78 a month, 78 complaints come in a month. I really want to point out that only 12 citations get written out of that. So you've only got, you've only got 12 out of the 620. Out of the 78, you only have 1.5 a month that happens. So I just think that that's a critical number for you guys to know and maybe get a sense of. We get a lot of resolution to these issues. It's a very high percentage, and the number of cases and things that end up having to go to court is very, very small, as you can tell. And out of the 12 citations that we issue, 3 of them got resolved before they got to court, and only 9 of them we ended up in court. So, out of the 620 that we've done so far this year, we've only ended up with 9 cases that have pushed back so hard and so far that they ended up going to court, and then we have the benefit of going in there with Mr. Laddie.
Well, and that speaks well of our code enforcement people and our
And-
police, because.
Oh, absolutely. The police, fire, our code enforcement folks, work cooperatively and in relation with a number of other departments, whether it's public works, building, planning, police, fire. They do a lot out there, and they get called to come out and help, and they have to call on occasion for help. So it really is a pretty good organization in that regard. So, and these are the stars. You've got Amy Wilkinson and Steve Hatfield who get out there, and neither of them could be here tonight, but they are excellent. Hopefully you've all met them, and if you haven't, come on in. I'd be happy to introduce you. They just do a great job for us. They've got the kind of personality and approach to things that really, it's pretty special to have code enforcement folks like this, because a lot of times it's very adversarial, and it's just not happening much out there with these guys.
Mr. Thomas?
Through you to Director Lloyd. As most of you have realized, that receiving these phone calls and the texts from the residents, and then you call back to residents, and I encourage them to use the email, and I know Scott does on social media all the time, and supplies out the emails, and the portholes aren't up right now. But when I have an issue with mowing's the best example. I am absolutely just astounded at what a great person Amy is, Wilkinson. I received so many compliments from her, and then when I call personally, her professionalism and the way that she deals with the problem resident tenants issues is just that. Steve does a great job, but I always get phone calls back about Amy, about what a great person she is. And when you're sitting there threatening them with a $300 bill that they're going to end up paying to get their lawn mowed, and they're calling and saying, wow, what a nice lady, that really says something about you being a great director, and keep up the good work with that. I was very impressed.
And I thank you more for making that comment about Amy, because she does work hard and she takes it serious. She's good.
Yep, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else?
Yes, I have.
Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. When subdivision bylaws are in conflict with the city ordinance, which one has the override?
Let's do that again.
When the subdivision bylaws are in conflict with the city ordinance, or the township ordinance, which one has the overriding power?
We have that. The city would. The
Township.
local jurisdiction. We can go to a certain point. Now, they can incorporate much stricter regulations than we could ever apply, but we have the minimum. They can't go below our minimum, is the best way to help describe that to you. They can put on additional requirements like no sheds, your house has to be blue, your roof has to be green, whatever they might want to do. And we can't, but we say your roof has to be, constructed properly, it has to be nailed properly. Those are the kinds of things that we deal with. But they can have stricter rules than we have. But ours always are sustained. And we answer, and help me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Laddie, but I don't believe we ever have the ability to enforce condominium associations, homeowner association bylaws or regulations, or the master deed.
Correct.
We have had residents come to us asking us, and we've had to tell them, you're going to have to get with your homeowners association and go to court with them, or get them to enforce their own rules.
Right.
So, I think that happens once a year, maybe, at least. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lloyd. That was very helpful, and I'll make sure that I start following the proper procedure.
Well, we all have email addresses and contacts now, so thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, moving on now to the, I think, Thursday agenda. I've got one too many agendas here, I think, but.
I'll take one, I don't
Oh,
have a
don't you?
Thursday agenda,
Okay.
so if you've got an
All
extra
right.
one.
Okay, so we'll move to Thursday's agenda,
Oh, I found it in
and
the back.
we're going to approve minutes. We're going to go to the consent agenda. Mr. Lemata?
So I just want to point out that from the packet that was sent out on Friday and the change to the agenda that's sitting before you this evening is that the treasurer's report did increase because we had to do a hand check for an invoice for the Genesee County Road Commission on a project, which we got a second notice on. We're not sure where the first notice had gone to, but Treasurer Guzak had processed, got accounts payable to process that payment since it was inadvertently misplaced, or we didn't get it, or whatever. So that was included in this dollar amount now. So the dollar amounts, if you look at your packet, was from Friday was $700,589. It's now $771,206. That addition is the check that's cut for the Genesee County Road Commission for the Concord project.
And there's a copy of the financial activity recap attached to the new agenda as well.
Because it was updated.
That gives that updated amount of $771,000. Thank you, Mr. Lemata.
Yep.
So that is item number one, or item A under the consent agenda. Item B, the board will accept the resignation of Ron Goldie from the Planning Commission. Mr. Goldie served on the Planning Commission since February 2010. His term expired in July. So we will be recognizing him for his efforts, either at the meeting on Thursday or in a future meeting. Item C, the board will consider a motion to reappoint to a 3-year term from August 2018 to July 2021 on the Planning Commission, Mr. Bandersky and Ms. Coulter. Item D, the board will consider a motion to reappoint to a 3-year term from August 2018 to July 2021 on the Historic Commission, Ms. Nag, Mr. Simons, and Ms. Honay. The item E, the board will consider a motion to award pump preventative maintenance contract to Kennedy Industries for $5,825 in 2018 and $11,650 in 2019, and authorize Township Superintendent to execute all related contracts and documents. Questions on that? Mr. Sears, anything you want to add? So is this something that we do on an annual basis, Mr. Sears, or are we just starting the annual contract?
This is a new maintenance program. We've never done annual preventative maintenance on our pumps at any of our water and sewer stations, and it's something kind of new to the industry. Generally, if you talk to any municipality, they're kind of more reactive than proactive, unless they have pump technicians that work for them, which we do not have. So this is kind of a new thing to us. It's something that I've been wanting to do since I came here, and we're finally getting to the point where we can put it in place. So this type of program will eliminate any kind of interruptions to our residents. If you ever had a basement back up with sewage because of lift station failure, this will prevent a lot of that. It also includes our well houses and our booster station, Embury Root booster station.
So it should help us with the longevity of the pumps.
Absolutely. Some of you probably seen pump replacements come before the board before $12,000 to $15,000 every time, and that can be because of a plug in the pump that we just can't recognize with our weekly inspections, or something's just off in the pump a little bit. it's hard to explain for me because I'm not a mechanical engineer or anything, but there's vibrations and stuff in them. And if they're not all tuned perfectly, it can really do some damage to them, so.
Ms. Lane?
Mr. Sears, it's showing $5,825 for this year and $11,000. Is that because this is a partial year and we can look
Correct.
at more an $11,600 cost annually?
Correct. This is a biannual maintenance, or, so they'll come out every 6 months, spring and fall, and inspect each station. So this year, it's late in the game. We'll just have our fall inspection, obviously, and then next year, we'll have both inspections, spring and fall.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Atkins?
For the preventative maintenance portion of it, is this something after a couple of years, some people in department could learn what the common things are and take over the preventative maintenance internally?
Sure. Yeah, we could. The reason that we chose at this time to go with a contractor is because they're confined spaces. And although we are trained to deal with them, it made more sense for us to have the experts come and do that and get into the confined spaces, pull the pumps. We don't often pull pumps because our employees aren't trained as much, but we could train them if we wanted to do that, absolutely.
So would somebody be working closely with the contractors for the preventative
They
maintenance?
will. We will have a technician with them
Okay.
at all times when they're in our stations. And this company does offer trainings. Obviously, it's not in-depth as to the training that these technicians get from Kennedy, but they do offer training on more routine maintenance. We do go visit every station weekly right now to test all the function of the equipment, make sure everything looks good, and that everything's running fine. But absolutely, in the future, we could take over this maintenance program.
All right, thanks.
So that might be cost effective in the future to have somebody on staff that does that.
It could be, yeah.
Mr. Massey?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a question for the director. Is it asking too much when a new process comes before the board? It should indicate that it's a new process. Because I've seen something so many times similar to this that you have had repairs done.
I thought my memo highlighted that it was a new maintenance program, because there's a memo attached in the packet that highlights the maintenance program, and the quote and the checklist is included there also.
I didn't see it.
Oh, okay. Well, it is in there. And,
Oh, okay.
But we could work on putting that on the agenda also.
Yes,
Absolutely.
because you have so many similarities of
Sure.
different processes.
As
Right.
opposed to a renewal or something like that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Director Sears? Okay, I'm glad we're doing some preventative work on that. That'll be good.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Item F, the board will consider a motion to approve Chief Wiles' request to purchase new patrol rifles for the police department through Vance's Law Enforcement in the amount of $13,707.48. This price is for 12 sets, including patrol rifle, sight, light kit, and sling. This project will be funded through the 2018 Capital Improvement Plan. Any questions of
I have a
Chief
question.
Wiles? Chief Wiles?
Mr. Chair, I have
Yes.
a question. You said sling, what are you referring to?
A sling, the simplest way to put it is a strap that'll attach to the forearm of the weapon and the butt of the weapon, so the officer can, for stability and carrying purposes, carry it over their shoulder and.
Like a military
Yes.
weapon?
The rifles we have now are pretty dated, I
They're old.
understand.
Yes. We purchased them through a government program, not the current government program that's available, but 1122 program back in 2002. The actual rifles were manufactured in the 70s. They are old, which is part of the reason for
Really
needing and
haven't
requesting the
improved.
current technology and weaponry.
So, Mr. Chair,
They're older than our
They're
agreement
lighter?
for Parks and Rec.
That is true.
What are they, just lighter?
I'm sorry?
They haven't improved, or what are they, just lighter? What are we doing with the,
Mr. Thomas?
what are we
and
doing
Mr.
with the
Massey.
old ones?
Well, that is a great question. The old ones we are keeping. They will not be on the street. Since we purchased them through the 1122 program, we cannot sell them.
The 1122 is the program from the federal
It's the
government.
old government program. It's not the current one that we've heard about in recent years. It's
And
the
gains.
program previous. We actually purchased these weapons from the government at a very reduced price, but we purchased them, the township did. We have roughly 20 right now. We are unable to sell them as a result of purchasing them through this program. The kicker on this program is these weapons are very valuable. When I say very valuable, I mean approximately $10,000 a weapon, just because of when they were purchased and then the condition that they're in. Unfortunately, we are stuck with them. We cannot get rid of them and reap any of the benefits from that financial benefit that we could for selling them.
So we're
Make
just-
sure we keep them safe.
Yes.
So are we gonna leave them in the
Until law changes,
rotation?
right?
No, they will not be on the road.
No, I said, are we gonna use it as a rotation? Are we still gonna be, what are we gonna do with them? Just put them in a safe
We're gonna
or?
put them in the safe in the armory.
To change the law, you might be able to sell some, right?
Buy a few police cars with them.
Yeah.
If we can sell them eventually and they're worth that much money, they could be valuable to the township finances, who knows? Mr. Massey?
I think Trustee Thomas asked my question. He alluded to the question that I'm gonna ask, but he backed away from it. Are these weapons lighter than the previous one?
Yes. Currently, the majority of the weapons we have now are AR-15s. They're much longer. These are M4s. They have the same weapons, the differences are a little bit shorter. They're collapsible stock in the rear, so a little shorter, more maneuverable, more tactically sound to use in how they would be used tactically with the officers.
What about distance?
Roughly the same ammunition. It's a .223 round.
Oh, okay.
So
That's what I use.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief. Next item, the board will consider a motion to approve Chief Wiles' request to purchase one 2019 Chevrolet Tahoe Police Pursuit Rated four-wheel drive and one 2019 Ford Explorer 4x4 in the amount of $64,439, and additional cost up to $5,000 for ancillary equipment to outfit the vehicles. These will replace two aging high-mileage vehicles that will be taken out of service and sold or auctioned. The purchase has been budgeted in capital projects. Mr. Atkins?
I just have two questions, Chief. One is, so I look at the quote, and it's from a dealership in Grand Rapids
for the Chevrolet, yes.
for the
Tahoe.
Chevrolet.
Bergdorf?
Yes.
Is there a reason we're not spending money locally?
The short reason is the Berger price for the Chevrolet is a state bid price. It is the best price we can get on that vehicle. We have talked to Alcera in the past, and they are not interested in being in the state bid process for whatever reason. We didn't get into it with them, but the state bid price is from Berger Chevrolet out of Grand Rapids.
I have had conversation with Mr. Sarah about it, and he said that he understands that we've tried, but he appreciates our sentiment and wanting to buy through them, but he understands that he can't come anywhere near this price.
Have we approached Applegate or anybody else in the county, try and keep some of the money in the county, or?
I have not, no.
I've talked to a few of them that I
Okay.
knew, and they didn't want anything to do with it, because they said they can't make enough money on it.
Every municipality around buys their vehicles through Berger Chevrolet. You can take a look at anybody around us, it's the state bid, and that's what it is. These guys want the state bid. They've lowered the price to get the state bid, and they are talk about a sole source provider. They have cornered that market basically because they're willing to turn it maybe on volume. They don't make a considerable lot of money on it clearly, but they've won that state bid, and it really, everybody goes through the state bid, and they all end up going through Berger.
And then my second question is, I see we're branching into the Ford market now. Is that?
Well, let me be clear. I was speaking with Treasurer Guzek earlier. I don't want to confuse anybody. The Tahoe is going to be a marked vehicle going into our patrol fleet, our 17 marked cars. The Explorer is an unmarked administrative vehicle. It is not going to be a patrol vehicle.
Okay.
But you're reviewing what type of vehicles in the future we want to use because they're going to discontinue.
Correct. So the way we have it set up now in capital projects, we have money allotted going into next year to replace additional patrol vehicles. Next year, I need to replace some of our Caprices, our sedans. The problem is, no one makes a sedan anymore. So that is the problem that I have to face next year when I'm looking for patrol vehicles, is what direction we go. Because I have some officers that they just prefer a smaller vehicle. They don't care to drive the Tahoe. They don't feel as safe in a bigger vehicle like that. So there's options. We just got to find the right option that'll best serve our needs here at the township.
Ms. Lane?
When you say that this is going to be an unmarked vehicle, not to be used by a patrol, who will it be utilized by?
Correct. This will be an administrative vehicle. Could be used by myself or a detective bureau. Could be a pool car, but it's not going to be a pool car. It will not be a vehicle that a patrol officer goes about his normal duties with.
I thought that we were using Enterprise
We
for
are.
vehicles and
for the last-
leasing them.
For the last nearly 3 years, we have used Enterprise. Initially, the reason for going to Enterprise was to increase our cash flow options going forward. Instead of spending, 90 grand, 100 grand on unmarked vehicles, to pay a smaller amount. The unintended consequence of doing that is our pool cars continue to build mileage, and we don't have any pool cars. So slowly, I think it's time to start transitioning out of that Enterprise program. You will see coming forward, possibly next month or the month after, additional vehicles through the Enterprise program, but that will be the last round of that. And then I see ourselves being in a better spot to purchase vehicles, which will much better suit our needs long-term.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Massey?
Do you have an idea of how many vehicles you may need to purchase next year?
Marked vehicles? Cruisers?
Yes, marked vehicles.
3.
3?
We do have a schedule, right, Chief, for...
Correct.
It's in your budget documents for 2019.
For the next several years, as
Yep.
far as what we're going to need each year. I don't know how far out
Yeah, I think
we go. but-
last year, the year before, we tried to spell out about 5 years, and it's 2 to 3 vehicles each year to make sure our fleet is in good shape.
Right, so we've mapped it out for numerous years ahead.
So next year, will you need unmarked vehicles also?
Yes, that was one of the requests that I made in my budget for 19, was additional unmarked vehicles, purchasing those.
Yes, I'm asking you for a reason it's gonna come up again. Okay?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
It's through you to Superintendent Limita. The 2018 budget, we weren't buying any administrative vehicles. We were just leasing them from Enterprise. Aren't I right?
I can probably answer that for you. That is true. Initially, that was the plan.
Well, this is still the same budget year,
Yes.
so do we have to make a budget amendment?
No.
I mean, because it took you over 45 minutes to convince me that leasing these administrative vehicles for our command staff was the way to go and not to purchase them.
When we had the conversation about leasing vehicles, Trustee Thomas, this goes back to 3 years ago.
No, this was you and I last year.
This goes back to 3 years ago when we initially made the decision after about 9 months of working with Enterprise on looking at converting our entire fleet over.
Right.
Decision was made that we would lease 3 vehicles to see how that fit into our program. The unintended consequence of that is exactly what Chief Wiles said. We don't have the pool cars coming up because we've got 3 leased vehicles, so we didn't have usually we're turning cars over from the unmarked fleet and it goes back into pool cars. Unfortunately, what we ended up with was we got rid of some cars because they had considerable miles on them, or in the opinion of our mechanic, were no longer roadworthy or worth repairing. But we took those, it ended up, costing us the idea of 3 vehicles coming back into this. So in an operational decision between Chief Wiles and myself, talking about what are we gonna do next year, one of the things we talked about with bringing the Ford Explorer in is let's take a look at it, because that is an option that we could use for smaller vehicles to replace the sedans. So we're gonna bring one of those into our fleet now, gives him the opportunity to experience that vehicle and see if it makes sense. I don't believe that we'll lease any more vehicles. Ron and I have had this conversation. I don't believe we'll lease any additional vehicles. I think that, that decision hasn't been totally made yet, but based upon our experience, and I have nothing but good to say about Enterprise. They did what they said they were gonna do. They were fantastic to work with. Their follow-up was tremendous, but I just don't think that it fits our program. We're certainly purchasing the vehicles through pool cars for assessing. We're gonna do the same thing for building department, is replace those vehicles over the next couple of years. And because we don't put that many miles on them, we may keep them for longer. Those assessing vehicles we intend to keep for 10 years. But it really depends on, you know, they don't get a lot of miles, but it has to do with how well they hold up. And we make that decision based on what our mechanic, our senior mechanic tells us when it's time to get rid of a vehicle. So in this
Okay.
particular instance, we decided that, you know, we're probably gonna step away from leasing and we're gonna go back to purchasing vehicles.
So with this Ford vehicle, this will be used by one of your command staff, yourself, your,
Yes. Typically what we do when we purchase a new vehicle, we start in our command staff, and then as new vehicles come in through the coming years, we cycle that down to our detective bureau. and
oh,
then
we haven't had the new vehicles in 3 years because the last board was leasing them. So I take it somebody's lease is up, or is this a brand-new vehicle for a brand-new command staff?
This is a new vehicle, but the leases are not up. These are 5-year leases. They're equity leases. I did contact Enterprise to find out where we were in that equity lease, and we do have equity built up in all these vehicles. Meaning, if we were to get rid of this program right now, we do have some equity built up in these vehicles that would come back to the township for leasing other vehicles, or what, just back in the township's, you know, coffer, so to speak.
So this new Ford vehicle, this new Ford Explorer, you're going to use for one of your command staff, but we still, the moving up of Lieutenant Simpson, so this would be one of your command, so you're minusing a brand new vehicle, and this would be used for that vehicle, and then we're gonna step away from the leasing from the rest of the command staff,
Correct.
correct?
The plan is to start phasing our way out of the lease process.
I applaud you for trying the program and experimenting to see if this would work for our needs. So sometimes you got to try something for a few years and see if it works. But the Ford vehicle, is that part of a statewide bid?
That is through, we don't do a lot of Ford, so let me look it up here.
Right, but it's a
Signature
statewide.
Ford Abawaso.
But that's a statewide
That is a
bid
state bid
program
price,
as well.
yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next, on Thursday, we will have a presentation for truth in taxation. And I don't know if anybody has any input on that right now, Mr. Limita?
You will have a PowerPoint presentation given to you by the Director of Assessing, Becky Salvati. She'll walk you through why we're holding the Truth in Taxation hearing. And realistically, I think it's important for the board to understand is the language is required by the state. So when we put the language into the public notice, it is very specific. So when it says that there's going to be a 10% increase in revenue, you know, from this, by holding this Truth in Taxation hearing, that did put some consternation in some residents out there who are wondering why is the board increasing their taxes by 10%. That is not the case. The Headley Amendment rolls back our tax rate. So we did have a Headley rollback. Now you can hold a truth in taxation hearing, and what that does is it allows you to use a factor that is provided to you by the state that says instead of just accepting the Headley rollback, you don't have to take that entire rollback. You can use the factor and apply that towards the separate mills for operating and extra voted. So that number was like 0.9903 or something. So rather than take the full Headley rollback, we're going to take a smaller rollback by holding a truth in taxation hearing and hold on to more of our operating millage. And it's important because I just want everybody to remember, even with 5 solid years of growth, we're only at 87% of where we were in 2007 from a revenue standpoint, from a taxable value standpoint. The only addition is the 1 mill for extra voted fire, which is in there, and there was also a millage approved for the arts, which goes in, but this is only applying to the township millage. And so what you're seeing is we're holding a truth in taxation hearing. She will do the presentation so she can walk you right through the information and show you exactly. We're experiencing actually some rollback on township operating, the police millage, the mosquito millage. We could collect more. We're only bringing in enough for what we need. And then the Parks and Rec millage also rolled back a little bit based upon that factor that we applied. So I know it can be really confusing to walk through, but Director Salvati's PowerPoint will really, in effect, walk the board through it and walk the public through it so they can see exactly how we compare from prior years. The real only increase in your millage amount is with what the residents voted to increase.
Unfortunately, the newspaper ad for the public hearing does confuse individuals to thinking that we're raising taxes considerably, and so it'd be good to have, hopefully they attend the meeting.
It's state law, though. It
Right,
is
I
state
understand
law.
we don't have anything to do with the wording, but it is confusing to the general public. Mr. Massey?
You've answered the question.
Okay, so yeah, the wording isn't of our choosing, it's
Yes.
the state's requirement, but,
Yeah.
okay. Very good. Next item is, will be operational issues, and the board will consider a motion to appoint Ghassan Saab to a 3-year term on the Planning Commission until July 2021. And I believe he will be here on Thursday to meet all of you, and I think he'll be a great addition to our Planning Commission. He's been involved in a number of developments personally, and will bring that experience to our Township Planning Commission. Yes, Ms. Lane?
There are, for the public's good, there are 2 different Ghassan Saabs, so you might want to indicate that there is an older gentleman and this is a younger gentleman.
I'm not getting into any age, but
All right, there are 2 gentlemen with the same names.
this younger Ghassan Saab is a resident of Grand Blanc Township
And a voter.
and like I said, lives in our township. I'm not sure the other one, I know the other one doesn't, so. But yes, there are 2 different ones, and, okay. Next item is item B. The board will consider, or shall consider, a resolution to approve a total authorized levy of 6.8250 mils for tax year 2018 comprised of, and I'm not sure, do I need to go through those at this time, or we will do that on Thursday, but everyone can see what those millages are. Item C, the board will consider a motion to approve the purchase and installation of campus-wide Wi-Fi mesh network by Communications Technology, Inc., CTI, in the amount of $15,890, and authorize superintendent to execute all required agreements. Mr. Lemata?
So we've, over the years, installed different access points throughout the township campus to try to improve our Wi-Fi access. Yet if you're working in here, if you're back in my side of the building, you have to pick up the finance, and then if you come up to the auditorium, you've got to pick up another one. We don't have consistent Wi-Fi access throughout the entire municipal campus. That's a problem. You have to sign out, re-sign in to pick up different ones. We also need to have a guest access available when we have people come in to do presentations. So with this, Director Beller had this CTI come in, and they really came in and walked through and looked at all of the different access throughout. We clearly have a need out in the DPW barns, especially to pick up Wi-Fi because of everything that those guys need it for. And so we were able to come out and have these guys come out and really take a look, and they basically went through every part of our entire operation to look to see signal strength and where things needed to be. And Director Beller's here to answer any other questions you might have. But we think it's critical for our operation to improve our Wi-Fi access. We also, this was not budgeted for 2018, however, we did have budgeted for 2018 in the supervisor's technology budget for a time system, basically like a time clock for your computer, that we're not going to move with because there's an issue that was $22,000, and we're not going to move forward with that out of capital projects this year, because we heard bad things about how it matches up with, ExecuTime matches up with our BSNA system. So we don't want to move into something until we're positive, so we're going to hold off on that capital projects. That does free up the money this year to get the Wi-Fi done instead out of capital projects. It is a capitalized thing, and I would recommend that the board approve it so that we can get consistent Wi-Fi access throughout the campus.
Mr. Massey and then Mr. Thomas.
I have a question.
Yes.
To the best of your ability, can you tell me why the Wi-Fi was set up such a mess as it was in the past?
Well, we looked at doing this several years ago, and for cost purposes, it wasn't approved. And so we needed to have access points and Wi-Fi communication, and we set it up basically in the conference room areas where we'd have a lot of developers in. So that's why it was set up. We've got 3 access points near these conference room. And if you know the history of this building being an old armory, the walls prevent signals to go through the walls. So because of the cost several years ago, we decided to do 3 access points, and each one of those are managed individually. With this system, we'll be able to access it from one point and push out all the updates and everything from that one point.
How many access points will there be with?
I believe we had 20 on there.
It
but-
looks like a ton.
But because over here, and also one of the other reasons is there's a few dead spots over in the police department, if Chief Wiles could say something like that. But also I found out that a lot of the patrol officers, whenever they come in and do the reports, they don't have access to Wi-Fi outside the building. So they're pulling over next to the garage and connecting to the garage Wi-Fi. And one of the access points we're wanting to put over is by the Sally Port, so where they pull up there, they can complete their reports where they need Wi-Fi access. So we're going to cover the campus with Wi-Fi to be more efficient from different departments.
Mr. Thomas?
I just want to make sure that this is going to cover the playland property.
All of it?
I mean, once
to get it over there.
I mean, we could add some.
It's
I
not
don't
in the
know where.
packet. Well, it's not in the packet, so.
Well,
Right.
it's expandable though, probably.
Yeah,
to
we'll
run
be
a
able to
line over
expand
there.
it, but there'll be some cost to expand it once we get whatever we're going to do over there.
Mr. Beller, how does this affect security? Does this make us more secure, or?
Well, we can secure, I mean, what will it allow us to do in some of the conference rooms where there's times where, you know, department heads might need to access information on the server, on their network with their login and everything, they'll be able to access it from there. Right now, if we need to access it, we got to physically plug into a port there in the conference room, and then you've got wires and cables going across the floor. And
So will this, there's going to be a guest access.
there'll be a guest access.
That's
and then-
separated from,
Yes.
so there's a wall between,
Yes.
so that will be more secure
Yeah,
than
that'll be
rather
more
than
secure.
giving
Right now, it's just
visitors.
a guest network, so, you know, anybody, and we can put a disclaimer up, said you have to accept these conditions to connect to it. So there'll be a login screen to connect to our Wi-Fi.
Mr. Guzak?
So I know there was a problem with the walls, but so the new technology broke down that barrier problem?
No, it doesn't break it down because we'll need multiple access points to be able to hand it off from each other. Because right now, if we put one here and, you know, and that would not go through one of these walls. I mean, so
you're
it's
still
going to
gonna
require.
So you're still gonna run hard wires in all the different spots to
Yes.
get more access points?
Yeah, we'll have all the access points and they'll run the wiring cable.
Hardwired
yes,
to it, right?
back to that one access point.
So that's how you're getting around the walls,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and that's why there's additional access points that's required, because like I said, we only have 3.
Right.
And it's covering mainly the conference rooms.
Yeah, the major points, because we
Right.
didn't have the funds to do all of
So,
it.
so we keep the same service provider for the internet?
Right, yes.
Okay, but we could always change that, that isn't
Oh, yeah, we
part
can
of
always
that.
change that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't think there's any other questions. Thank you, Mr. Beller. Next item is item D, and the board will consider a motion to approve Director Kate Edson's request to use millage funds to complete resurfacing of the playscape at Bicentennial Park. This includes awarding the bid to Soft Services for the amount of $34,804.09 and an additional cost up to $3,500 in materials to be installed by Parks and Recreation staff. Good evening.
Good evening. So before you is this project. The replacing of the surface at the original playscape, which is outside of the South Pavilion, has been a part of our original 4-year plan that we put together when we brought that to the board to put the millage question on the ballot. Initially, it was part of the year 2, which is 2018 spending plan, but because of the additional costs of the basketball courts in year 1 And then the group of, the football group that's practicing at the park, who came forward and made a plea to move the construction of the multipurpose field up, we pushed it back to year 3. With the additional funds available from not doing the floor at the pavilion, we would like to move it back to year 2 and get that done. So the commission has approved this, not moving it back, but I anticipate that they will in another week or so. The reason I'm here tonight is my understanding is that normally the board likes to just have a workshop the 3rd, 4th Tuesday of the month and likes to conduct their business during these meetings. In order to still get this project done this year, obviously weather is going to start becoming a factor. So that is why I'm here tonight.
That's a good point, Ms. Hudson. That I know Mr. Mansour in particular, and I know originally when we talked about whether we should have that 4th Tuesday meeting, it was to kind of conduct board business or future positioning, I guess is what better described.
It's one of the reasons that you guys have the length of agenda that you have on the first one is because we are withholding items from the 4th Tuesday meetings, that it's focused on the future positioning of board subcommittees at the board's request. Director Edson did ask me about this one, and I suggested we move it to this one as an operational decision so that it wasn't showing up on the September 25th meeting.
As to the sole provider, the current playscape surfacing is a tile surface. We wanted to replace it to that standard. Soft surfaces is the only vendor that really services the Midwest. If we go outside the Midwest, you're going to look at a huge price upgrade in shipping. They did give us a substantial discount because they were the original installer. So they have the layout of the current surfacing, and that is why we're presenting them as a sole provider.
Right. Ms. Hudson, what's the benefit of the tiles as opposed to going with, I don't know, what do they have that, like, I know they have the rubberized, it's like mulch, but it's rubber or even mulch. What's the advantage to having tiles?
Well, you're constantly replacing mulch every year because it spreads out. It's not as soft to fall on if the kids fall. I think it's more aesthetically pleasing to look at the tile. I mean, there's several reasons to go with the tile.
Okay. Mr. Guzak?
So if I heard you correctly, you said that you did check the other suppliers, outside of this area, because this guy's the closest one in this area, but it would be more expensive, right? So in effect, you didn't have a bid, but you actually did realize that it was cheaper to go this way,
Well,
right?
did I go outside the Midwest to check? No, but I know that the cost of freight would go up substantially.
Well, I know, yeah, because you checked out some of those numbers, so if it's high enough, there's no sense even bidding it, right? That's
Correct.
my point.
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Well, I understand Mr. Lemata's comment about making a little bit of an operational change to have it presented tonight, but we did just kind of go through, I worked on a
True.
little roadmap of the process, so we are outside of the process on this without having the commission approve it first and then come to the board, and I think that's where you kind of have an opportunity to flesh out the questions of 3 quotes and have a little more information. I just, you look at these tiles and the media that they're produced from, recycled tires often and traffic cones and stuff. It's hard to think that there's only one company that services this area. I'm not challenging you on it, but I just don't know what the process was on this one that was followed to actually put it out for bid, or if we just went to the current company because it was a little more convenient since they are familiar with the job since they've already done it. It just seems like we always go and get 3 bids or attempt to, and I don't see it on this case.
Well, it would be very difficult to bring someone in from outside the Midwest to give us a bid. And they are the only known tile surfacing. If we don't want to do tile, then we can do something else. But our goal was to maintain the standard that we've set when we put in the playscape originally. So.
Yeah, Mr. Massey?
Have you finished, trustee?
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks. Thank you.
I have a question. I'm sort of confused when you say out. I have a question for the director, Mr. Chair. When you say outside of the area, give me some distance that you're speaking of? In other words, is it 100 miles from here? Is it 200 miles? Is it 600 miles? So I have some idea that, in my own estimation, what the cost would be.
I think we're looking at anywhere to 500 miles and above.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, I have another question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I don't quite understand the process at the Bicentennial Park, but help me out with this. Why do we have to approve this? I'm going somewhere with this question. Why do we have to approve it?
Actually, there was a meeting this past week. I'm just laughing because we actually answered that question, not with the board. There was the task force met with Ms. Edson and went through the entire process of how things move through the chain of command to be approved, and it's quite a lengthy process. That actually I see some notes over here from or a photograph actually of the diagram of how that decision-making process flows for the city with their parks, the township with ours, and the schools, being that they're part of that as well. So it's just kind of humorous because to answer that is quite a lengthy ordeal on how that approval process works. And we will get into it, not tonight, but we will have a discussion on how that process works and see if there's some changes we want to make to it. But right now, we're using the current process, so I don't know how we want to answer that question that Mr. Massey has, but Mr. Lemina?
And I think, to the point about we just had a meeting and we're not following the exact process that we talked about in the meeting. And again, remember that this was turned in before that meeting that we had because the packet information is required by noon on Thursday. We didn't meet till Friday between 8 and 12. So this had to be in before then. It was an operational decision, like I said, otherwise it wasn't coming until the second week of October to you guys. If we want to get this done this year, which was the Parks and Rec Director's goal was to get it done. I agree with her as a sole source provider on this because I think that staying with the original surface makes sense. It's a surface that lasted for quite a long time. You guys had the opportunity to see it when we were out doing the park tour. I think it clearly needs to be replaced, and I think having the opportunity to get it done when we didn't do the concrete made sense. If we wait until we go through the Parks and Rec Commission and then we go back, bring it back to you guys in October, and by then we order it, the chances are that this becomes a 2019 project anyways. Not that we can't do it in 2019, but the funds are available. We're trying to get caught up on the deferred maintenance on quite a few things out there, and I support her 100% on moving forward.
But Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I guess I don't want to get into a conversation that's very lengthy, but I understand what she's doing very clearly. I have no problem with what you're doing, okay? But suppose, hypothetical, we turn this down Thursday. What happens? We voted down Thursday.
And we don't put in a new playscape surface. I mean, you turned it down, that ends it. It's your,
okay.
You guys have the millage funds.
Okay.
So that's the difference in the processes that we were talking about. I mean, part of it is, ours is a bit more cumbersome, to be honest with you, because we put together a 4-year plan and the board, the Parks and Rec Commission approved it and said, yeah, we want to get that done. The Township Board approved it and said, we love the plan, we think this is great, we want to get it done. But then as we go out for bids, it comes back to the board a couple of times actually, hey, can we hire an engineer to move forward if it's going to exceed $10,000, which is my spending limit. The board has to approve it. So then we hire a project manager and engineer, we put RFPs together, we go out for bids, we come back. The Township Board has to approve the bid process and before we can actually get out there to get anything done. So it takes a while in that process, and I think one of the things that we uncovered in the exercise last Friday was exactly that. I think there's some areas of improvement as we continue to work on this that we can probably streamline this somewhat so it doesn't have to come before the board 3 times to actually move a project forward.
Now, yes, Mr. Chair, yes. I guess what I saw in this is, thanks for your information. I needed that information. What I saw in here is that it's sort of foolish if we voted down and that kills the project. So why would you be taking the project to the Park Commission?
Well, if you vote it down, I won't take it to the Park Commission.
Oh,
So the usual process is for the Parks Commission to say, hey, here's a project we want to do. And it would come to our board to say, yeah, we agree, we want to spend the money on that. And so we're kind of doing a little bit backwards in that we're saying we want to do the project, and then we're sending it over to Parks, and they're going to say, yeah, we agree with you. or
Well,
something.
keep in mind that the Parks Commission has already approved it when they approved the original plan, and it
Okay.
was in year 2 at that time. They
Okay.
have made some adjustments to accommodate some other projects, but
And this process is coming before you only because you turned down the pavilion floor project, which freed up the funding for 2018. Otherwise, this had already been scheduled as a 2019 project. So we've changed that in the capital projects plan, which is included in your budget for this year. So, I mean, this is because of a unique situation. The reason we're not following the standard process is exactly that. It's because of, it's a changing, which often happens in public finance. Different opportunities arise, or a shift in priorities because of external factors. And this one, it was the board stopped the pavilion floor project, which freed up the cash, which made her want to pull it 1 year forward. And so that's why the process is somewhat different.
Mr. Thomas?
Well, one thing I do want to point out, though, that even though that prior board and the prior commission brought this up 4 years ago, or 2 years ago, it wasn't the same commissioners that are on the commission now. No, we have new commissioners, myself included. And another thing, when we talk about this one source, there's hundreds and hundreds of companies. There's a half a dozen local companies right now that sell the rubber 1 foot by 1 foot tile that we're looking at. I think what you're saying is the one source is the only manufacturer of that one particular brand name of it?
no. I mean, what 100 companies sell a 3.5 to 4 inch tile that interlocks and can be adjusted for fall zones?
Well, that's one of the things I think the commission needs to look at. There's local companies that sell that. There's local companies that have been to our parks and looked at it. So I think the commission really needs to look at that.
Can you give me those names so I can look into those?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna do it tonight. I was gonna do it when I could get it to you, because I just got the information today myself. So I was gonna email
When
it
is
to
the
you,
Parks
but,
Commission meeting?
the 20th, I think?
The 20th.
All right.
But one is Jack Walker and Sons in Swartz Creek on Linden Road. Another one, well, heck, I saw one at Sam's that sell the small rectangle. But I was gonna bring that information to the commission because I think it was pertinent to bring to the board. But the commission, I think, needs to vote, personally, I think the commission needs to approve this project openly and honestly in their commission meetings before they bring it in front of us. This is our tax dollars, so, and follow the procedures.
Mr. Atkins?
I have a couple of questions. Bear with me. Don't want to beat this to death. But how old is the current
16 years.
16 years? Is there any type of warranty or guarantee from this company?
5 years.
And, you know, two other questions. So I think when I was out at the park, so these look like some pre-cut or prefabbed tiles that are fit together like a puzzle. And if this is the same company that did the job the first time, then they must have some sort of a print.
Correct.
So they know how much square footage or whatever. Is it possible for since there's a potential for a tile to need to be replaced within that 16 years, maybe a couple of them, who knows? Could they have the tiles prefabbed, ship them to Parks and Rec, and we use our own employees to replace the tabs, or the tiles, like fitting together a puzzle?
We did do that. They left us some additional tiles on the initial installation, and so 1 or 2 went bad, and so we used those to fit into those spots.
What if we did the whole thing?
I don't know.
That's kind of what the quote's saying.
I didn't
Well,
read
there's
it that way.
3,500 for additional, I don't know.
That was additional, not
That's,
the whole job.
That's other stuff.
the fine sand that has to
Sand or
go down and the, I think it's 3A stone that has to also go in.
But Mr. Chair, I have a
Mr.
question.
Massey?
I have a question for the director. If your people did this work, you wouldn't have no guarantee, right?
Correct, there'd be no warranty.
So therefore, if they screwed up, what happens?
We have to fix it ourselves.
Well, yeah,
Oh,
We'd have to fix it ourselves.
okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Question for that then.
Okay, Mr.
So if you replace a couple tiles, does that void the whole warranty?
I don't believe so, that's why they left them for us.
Well, we have some time to think about till Thursday.
I
what
just,
you wanna
I'm
do.
sending you over this stuff right now, Director.
To who, Director Edson? Okay. All right, well, I don't know that there's
I have a
any.
question.
Sure, Ms. Flynn.
From Trustee Thomas. Trustee Thomas, you said that you had somebody out at the park looking at it, and I want to know how that came about.
I was curious, you and I spoke about this for, I don't know, 2 hours today, and I was gonna bring it up, I wanted to bring it up to the commission before I did, but the way that this project's gone by, the commission already knows that this has been voted on. We illegally, the commission illegally started the Open Meetings Act and violated the Open Meetings Act when this first project came out a week ago, and our commissions voted on this before I found out what was going on, before I looked at it, and then I contacted our attorney right away, and Attorney Laddie gave me the information saying that this is absolutely a violation of the Open Meetings Act. And he said that he advises me to respond to the not the director, but the president of the commission, which is Brad Hester, which I did. And then a email came back to us in a chain saying that the commission will look at this response on the 20th, or the director will add this to the agenda item on the 20th. And then I look at the packet, I get involved into this a little bit more, and I look at our packet, then I see that our director's requesting that we approve this before the commission does. Well, the commission's already looked at it and approved it, basically. Now, when you're asking about, am I getting involved in an operational thing in a commission? Yes, I am, because as a commissioner, I'm looking at, I'm going there representing my board of directors, which are us, our trustees. Do I think it's responsible that I double check and make sure that our millage money is being paid or being used correctly? Unfortunately, I wasn't a Parks and Rec commissioner when this was voted on by the prior board, prior board and the prior commissioners. So I did take it upon myself to go out there and look at it. I put in playscapes before when I worked with the Boy Scouts, and I knew that I wanted to see what was out there. I questioned Director Edson 3 times on email asking, why is this a single source? Because I couldn't understand when I Google it and the squares, all these vendors from Genesee County pop up. So yeah, was I getting into operations of Parks and Rec Commission? Absolutely, but this board has nothing to do with Parks and Rec because we're a 3rd member. So what's your question, Superintendent?
So my question remains is, you said that you had somebody out there looking at it. I'm asking, did you have a company come out and prepare a quote for this project?
Not an official quote. I had somebody come out and say, this is what I'm looking at. What do you think?
Because my concern is going to be, number one, it is about stepping over operationally because you're a trustee of the board. And I want you to be...
I was using this as a commissioner of the Parks and Rec. I was not out there as a trustee.
I have to look out for liability, Trustee Thomas. And if we're doing anything, if we go out for bids or we do RFQs, and if we have individual Parks and Rec commissioners or Board of Trustee members who go out and start to solicit other quotes or bids, that really gets into an area that could expose us.
I think
to
I
liability
think
as well as
let
expose you
me-
individually
I think you heard what I
to
said, that it
liability.
was not an official quote. I didn't ask for an official quote.
let me-
I absolutely asked him to come out and give his professional
Thomas,
opinion.
let me just get some clarification. Was there a request for quotes made?
No.
That sent out, or? Mr. Lehman has said that there was possibly a request for quotes that was sent out to potential
No, he
bidders.
said she brought forward the quote that this was the original installer. She wanted to put in the exact same material that from the original installer, and that she viewed that as a single source provider. I agreed.
For that particular
We
one
could have
product.
put chewed up rubber, we could put bark, we can put mulch, there's.
So there wasn't a
obviously
request for
there's tons of
quotes that was
other-
sent out and said all bidders send us your quote?
No, there was
or
not.
whatever? Okay, so we're okay there in that. Mr. Atkins?
One more question. So the other playscape, the ADA accessible playscape, that floor seemed to be a little different. Was that the same vendor?
Same vendor, it's just called a port in place instead of interlocking tiles.
And does that have the same warranty?
Correct.
Do you remember the cost of that one?
It's higher. I want to say that was more in the neighborhood of 57, 55, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things too, I just want to clarify for the public and what have you, that what Mr. Thomas, I think, was talking about is, and Mr. Laddie, maybe better for you to explain if need, but if I get it wrong, but the violation of the Open Meetings Act, one of the things that we have to be careful of as a board or commissions or what have you is with our email, in that if I send out an email to our board and say, hey, I'd like everybody to vote on this issue, I can't do that because obviously the public is not able to see how we're voting on a particular issue. The same would go for a commission asking for, hey, we want everybody to vote on whether or not we should do this project with this supplier. Is that accurate, Mr. Laddie?
And Mr. Bennett,
Go ahead,
Dave.
sorry.
That was my error. A lot of our subcommittees that have 3 members meet by email because they work out of town. And so I do have them reply to all and do a vote by committee to make a recommendation to the full commission. And I just inadvertently added that to that email. And I let Mr. Lehman know right away that had happened. So
It happens.
I apologize.
It happens, and I think, we learn from doing it.
It was, and just to verify what Director Edson said, she contacted me immediately, let me know that she had done it, and then told everyone not to reply back. She self-reported it to me, that was a violation.
And to Mr. Thomas' point, with regard to being on the commission, it's a working commission. I mean, I think your members do get involved in looking at all aspects of the park, right? I mean, I don't know if they go out and get, other opinions on things, but being that, I mean, it's a working commission, so I guess we could probably have a future discussion on what commission role should be and whether or not they should be delving into looking in depth into those projects or not, but I understand where Mr. Thomas is coming from too.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I'd just
Mr.
like to
Massey.
make a comment on the director's behalf. Just because, and I want the board to understand that this is my position. Just because you have 3 bids, it's not always the right thing to do to go with the cheapest bid. We have to bear that in mind.
Right.
Okay, because I don't want us to get into this thing where we're thinking, okay, if we bring in 3 bids, we're gonna take the lowest bid. That's not the case with me. It's the best quality work that's associated with a given company.
That's understandable. Well, it sounds like we have a few issues to consider, whether we want to go outside of the normal process, and Mr. Lehman is trying to accommodate our board's wishes by not putting decision-type items on the 4th Tuesday agenda, and so he's trying to accommodate us in that regard. Ms. Edson wants to be able to move forward on this, and she has a meeting on the 20th. We do have a board meeting on the 25th.
Make an exception?
So, I mean, we could either make an exception as Mr. Guzak's asking, or, depending on what we decide on Thursday. Mr. Atkins?
Just one more comment. As we look at moving into a premier park status. And some of the upgrades we're doing, you know, that are going to be around for, in this case, 15, 16 years. I don't know, does the commission put much thought into, you know, color schemes or logos on these tiles? You know, something to think about going forward. If, you know, if we have this for 15, 16 years, I don't know if there's that type of discussions that are had within the commission, or...
That's usually done at the staff level and then presented to the commission.
Okay.
We actually, Soft Surfaces actually did provide a second quote that was higher, that did offer some different color textures, but they said that normally they put those in at like daycares, because if kids are crawling around on it, sometimes the color comes up a little bit, but in our case, we're not going to have a lot of kids crawling around on it. So the thickness of the tile was the same in both quotes, and so we opted for the lower quote because we didn't feel that that added enough value to go another $4,000 or $5,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, yes,
one
Mr.
question
Massey.
for the director. I'm under the impression that you would like to get this project completed this year. Is that correct?
I would.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, we will talk about it more on Thursday.
Yeah, I think we should just make an exception. That way we can vote on it on the 25th, you know, one time that we have to talk about an operational issue won't hurt. That way she can get it done, if everybody agrees with everything.
We've done it before, the operational
Yeah,
stuff
I mean, why
on the
not?
last meeting.
Would that work, Ms. Hudson, if we decided on,
Yeah.
that your
Yes.
Parks Commission looked at it on the 20th or whatever, and Ken can talk to them about whatever information he has, or? Okay.
All right,
All
thank you.
right, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is that the board will consider a motion to accept for a first reading the ordinance creating a downtown development authority and designating boundaries of the district as discussed in the public hearing held June 14th, 2018. So, Mr. Laddie?
Thank you. This is phase 2 of, or step 2 of developing a DDA, and it's an important step because it creates an ordinance that actually creates the authority, it creates a board of directors, it adopts the map that we have been examining for several months, and really gets the ball rolling. Well, more hands the ball off, I guess, to a newly created board of directors. And you can see in the ordinance that in addition to creating the authority and recognizing the map, one of your tasks is to create a board of directors. And the choices that you have, and by the way, I realized my memo was a bit long. I also realized it had draft over it, but be rest assured you got the final copy. But what I try to do is explain the relatively simple ordinance, because this ordinance on its face looks pretty straightforward, but really what it does is unleashes a lot of tools, a lot of opportunity for the board of directors to carry out what we hope to be a concerted and concentrated effort in this area to reap the benefits of tax increment financing to create improvements to the district that will see additional development. And we have, when we first started talking about a downtown development authority in this area, we have just a potential for exponential, significant financial growth. And what that means, though, is we have to give up a little bit of control. We have to create this board. We have to give them the tools and some money to go ahead and develop some of these ideas and some of these baselines. And what we'll do primarily is when we create the board of directors, we have to decide how many there are going to be, for example. I chose the smallest number. I'm not sure why I did that, except my thought is that maybe fewer captains might be easier to direct a ship. But you can choose up to 12 members if you want. You can see that the statute has them staggered. They have to be at least a majority of them have to be property owners within the district. If we have more than 100 residents, and I say this in a careful way, if there are more than 100 residents living in the plan area, which is our entire district, then at least one of those members has to be one of those residents. That will come into play later on when we start talking about whether we, when we develop a development plan and a TIF plan, because we may have to create a citizens group. And if there are more than 100 citizens or residents in this area, we're going to have to create a special advisory committee for them. But we don't have to deal with that right now. All we have to do is focus on whether or not we want to appoint 8 or 12 people or any number in between. Supervisor Bennett is sort of the de facto leader of this group. They will be able to choose a chairman. So at that point in time, I think there'll be a kind of a handoff of your moderator duties. But what will happen then is we will try to get them organized and directed to immediately begin to give some thoughts to the types of improvements that we want. We know we want to raise money to install infrastructure. We know we want to spend money on the advertising and development and promotion of this area. We have all sorts of opportunities. This board has all sorts of opportunities to create a plan that is very wide-ranging and very all-encompassing and could carry on for decades if we wanted to give it that sort of scope. And I think we should. And one of the things that I had a discussion with our bond counsel, Roger Sweats, because one of the options for funding this DDA board of directors is to sell bonds. And he said, when you sell the bonds, make sure your plan is as wide open as you can make it. It encourages, put in there everything that you can imagine, put a timeline on it if you can, put a price tag on it, because that will serve as essentially the roadmap for the development. The money at first is going to come from you guys, and we have to figure out how much that's going to be, because we want them to hit the ground running to create a plan. They're going to need some assistance, and they can actually create their own. They can hire a treasurer, they can hire a secretary, they can hire a lawyer, they can go out and hire a planner to help them do this. I don't know if they need to do that all in the beginning, but they're going to need some seed money. I included an example of a relatively similarly sized and populated DDA, the Davison Township DDA. That plan that was put together by Wade Trim, I have estimates cost about $25,000 to implement. And so we're going to have to give some thought to that. Next, we need to talk about some of the, even though they have a wide range of authority and a lot of tools at their disposal, you guys are going to control their purse strings until we get this TIF financing up and running. And what that's going to do is, again, capture the incremental tax increases after we've created a baseline. The taxing jurisdictions have allowed us to keep that money in the DDA for infrastructure and development and promotion. That's going to take a while to get going. And so we want to try to do this as quickly as we can, because we've got an opportunity, if we can set our baseline and get our TIF plan adopted this year, we may be able to capture some relatively recent significant development in that area. This morning we talked about the practicality of getting a development plan and a TIF plan adopted by you, prepared by the DDA board that you haven't even created yet, before the end of the year. And I want to be optimistic, but I'm not sure that's all going to be accomplished. But we still want to move forward with relative speed. And so, again, tonight will be, or Thursday night will be our ability to adopt the first reading of this ordinance. We're going to have a second reading of it, and then we're going to have to publish it if it's approved, and send it to the Secretary of State for their approval. What it's going to do then is put an immediate burden on Supervisor Bennett to recommend however many members you choose to form your board of directors. You approve them. He makes a recommendation, and you approve them. And then we try to get them going as quickly as we can, organizing their first meeting. They need to adopt some bylaws that you'll approve. We're going to give them some seed money to give them whatever tools they need to begin to administer themselves. And we have to decide where that seed money goes. And I think, obviously, Superintendent Lehman is going to have to tell you exactly what money that could be and where it could come from and how much it will be. We can, if it turns out that we're not going to be able to get our development plan and TIF plan in place this year, that gives everybody a little bit more time. And we're gonna continue to work on that question. We may not have an answer by Thursday, but right now we'd like you to move as quickly as you can on this, and that may be adopting this ordinance on Thursday. It may be considering at your last Tuesday of the month in September, maybe the second reading, so we can have a publication. But really, it's an interesting process, because I realize my memo is single-spaced, 3 pages. The ordinance is broken up into sections. It's about 3 pages long. It's an action-packed document. And I hope you had an opportunity to take a look at my memo, because I tried to explain the process and tried to lay it out, but really, we're gonna have to keep talking about this and keep developing this as we get them up and running, as they have questions, as we try to spur them in certain directions. And really what I guess I'd like to do now is if you have any questions that I can answer, particularly regarding the ordinance, I'd love to take the opportunity to do that. But I know that you're gonna have questions that are gonna come up, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe in 2 weeks, and this will be an ongoing discussion and dialogue.
Ms. Lane?
With those people appointed to the board being property owners, several people own property and don't live here. Will they have to be registered voters in the township?
You only have to be an owner or have an interest, an ownership interest in property in the DDA. You do not have to be a resident.
So, Mr. Laddie, let's take, for example, a business, Genesis, for example. For somebody to serve on the DDA board from Genesis, obviously, I don't believe any of the employees would probably be the actual owner, but they could represent the owner.
Well, there could be an owner's representative appointed, but what we need to do then is we would need to make sure they had the authority to represent the owner, so that they will qualify as one of those members of a corporation or member of an LLC.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Massey.
I have a question. Could you share with us your thinking when you came up with the board member number, even number versus odd number?
Well, because Mr. Bennett's going to be a member, he's a de facto member of that board, so there'll be 9. If you choose 8, then Mr. Bennett's on there.
Oh, okay, okay.
Right now, I'm targeting 8, but, you know, but if we get a couple more people that we want to put on there, I guess we could look at more. But, yes, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Bennett, may I ask that when you make a decision or are going to make your proposal to the board of who you want to recommend, that we get some sort of a resume of those individuals?
Yeah, we'll have some kind of biography on each of them.
Thank you.
You want to, when you talk to them, one of the things that we did is we recognized the power of the board and their authority. I singled out, and I included the statute so you could see the wide range of possible activities they can get engaged in. But I singled out particularly 8, I think it's 8, because we want to make sure that they are willing and able to put together a plan, development plan and a TIF plan, and really that focuses on the first step, which is the creation of, or the installation and purchase of infrastructure. And so I think when you talk to these people and when you approve them, you want to make sure that they see the vision and that they see the economic possibilities, and that they're dedicated really to paving the way, and literally paving. I mean, we may have a road that gets built through there. You want to make sure that they're on board with that, because they could find themselves off in different directions, creating retail or technology incubators and things like that. I mean, those are all that's part of the authority that they have, and that may be well and good, but that's not our first priority. We want to hit the ground running.
Well, I can tell you this, the couple of people I've already spoken with are business people that have business mind and have already offered suggestions on what they see as things that could help that area. So there are already people that are on the ground running with this type of mentality already.
And it's interesting, the design of the statute. You're creating self-interested people that are going to have the opportunity to improve their properties and their neighbors' properties and properties in the area. And I think that's one of the interesting purposes of the DDAs. You're going to get people that are invested in the development. even more than we are.
Right.
So-
Yeah, they have a lot at stake.
Right.
Okay, well, I'm excited, and I guess, also I'd ask this board that, this morning, we talked a little bit about timeline, and I guess if our board needs to meet on a basis that, maybe there's a meeting that we need to schedule outside of our ordinary meeting to help speed this along, I think our board would be willing to schedule one of those if need be.
Well, what we'll do is Mr. Lehman and I will realistically look at the timeline. I know there's, for example, on the TIF end of it, once the plan's prepared, there has to be a public hearing that has 30 days notice. You have to be able to review it. We have to invite in the taxing entities to make comments on it. I'm afraid that's the 75 days. That came out of my mouth right now. I don't know if we're going to do it, but we're going to try. Appreciate the offer. Well, if we can realistically fit it in,
Okay.
we may do that.
Well, we want to do it well, so.
That's also
obviously.
true, because we're Grand Blanc Township. We're not going to do this
Right.
in a shoddy way.
Mr. Thomas? I'm sorry?
After this, we take 5.
Well, let me just ask, okay, we've got a number of items left on our agenda. The item H, Mr. Manswer obviously isn't here this evening, so we want to tackle that on Thursday, is that?
Thursday anyway.
Yeah, that's for Thursday. And by the way, you have a compiled evaluation, and then Mr. Lemata has a copy of the compiled evaluation. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to give Mr. Lemata the option to talk about his performance in open or closed session, and then we're going to need some time Thursday night, hopefully not too late, to go into that room and make some decisions.
So we only really have one more agenda item to discuss.
Money, I can't take it.
Well, we have 2 more. I'll wait.
Do you need a break for 5 minutes?
Would you mind?
What's that?
Yeah, please.
All right,
Or
we will
just
take
go
a
ahead.
3 or 4 minute break here.
Yeah, you get in that groove.
All right. We'll call the meeting back to order now, after a brief break, and we will go to item number F under operational issues, which is the board will consider a resolution to create a township revolving fund of $500,000 to be used for the purposes of financing the cost of certain special assessment projects. Mr. Lemata?
So Attorney Laddie drew up the resolution for the board's consideration, and this really came about, we've had some discussion about it in the past, but last year, if you guys recall, we did the Concord Green project, and we didn't get the final on that, so it wasn't bonded in fiscal year 2017. It was finally completed, punch list done this summer, and we still hadn't initiated to go out for the bonds because we just really got that final bill, and Treasurer Guzak, I mean, it was maybe in beginning of August or something before we finally got the final.
Right, and that was just an email. We haven't actually received the final bill, but we've got a final dollar amount on
They
an
told us
email.
that this is the final, everything's done, punch list is over.
Yeah.
So that got us to talking about the creation of a potential township revolving fund for these smaller projects. And so for the board's consideration, why would you want to do it? Well, number one, for these projects like the Concord Green, where it comes in at $500,000 or $470,000, if you create a revolving fund for that $500,000, number one, you don't have to go through out to initiate bonds. You save the bond cost, maybe about $7,000 in this case, that would get passed on to residents. And you can charge the interest and collect the interest for yourself. So you're taking the money, you're putting it out there. If you look at the Concord Green project, and we can certainly do this with that project, we've already paid out some of the costs of doing that. We didn't have the final invoice yet, but we've already paid out some of the costs going back to last year with township funds. If you create this revolving fund, the folks are going to pay it back to you. Right now, you could charge up to 5% interest. So currently, maybe you could get 3.5%, 4%. So you would put it out at 4%. And we know that if we're going to fund a project like this from a Concord Green perspective, Treasurer Guzak had to estimate the cost last year to put out on the December tax bill. Well, we can do the same thing with this fund. We know that it's going to be approximately $500,000. We are going to finance it ourselves. We don't have to worry about bond costs. We know that we can charge 4% interest and keep all that interest, put it back into the revolving fund. and then that money gets available as it gets paid back by the taxpayers or by the folks who benefited. Say 8 years from now, folks come to you and they've got a $350,000 road project that they'd like to do in finance. Well, you wouldn't have to go out for bonds for that one. You've reloaded your revolving funds. You can fund that one in-house, charge the interest, save your residents and taxpayers the cost of the bond. And so, right now, if you did it out at 3%, for example, on a bond, you'd have a 1% charge for the administrative fees to come back to us. If you do the entire thing like this, you're doing it at 4%, the entire 4% is coming back to you. So it does save taxpayers money, and it makes the township a little bit of money. Why would you not want to do it? Well, you can only you're going to establish a revolving fund for $500,000. You're not going to establish a new one the next time somebody comes. You are establishing a revolving fund with $500,000 in it. So if somebody comes back to you the next year and says, hey, we'd like to have you guys do this road project in our subdivision, and we heard that you're going to run it through the revolving fund. Well, the money's already been spent on the first one. You don't have it available until it gets paid back in. So you'd still bond that project. It doesn't mean you're not going to bond projects, but it just gives you that flexibility to potentially save your residents some money from bond costs, and it's an investment on the township's perspective. You're investing basically excess funds from the general fund at 4% for 10 years.
Well, we're investing in our own township is what we're doing.
Right.
Mr. Laddie, did you have anything you wanted to weigh in on that?
No, I
or?
think Superintendent Lima explained it very well. One of the things we might have to do, and I'll have to talk about this with Mr. Lima and Mr. Guzak, so we might have to pass a resolution, particularly for Concord Green, just to make sure that because we anticipated selling bonds on that project, and we've cleared this with our bond counsel that we can sort of jump ship midstream if we want, but we may need to amend a resolution. But other than that, the process was explained very well.
Okay. Ms. Lane and then Mr. Massey.
I know the residents will ask us, where is this money coming from? Can you be a little bit more specific other than just saying our general fund?
Clerk's budget. No, I'm just, all kidding aside, Mr. Limita.
It's hard to be more specific than general fund because it's the general fund balance is what's funding it. Right now, like I said, we didn't bond this last year when it started, so if the invoices come in and we authorize payment on those invoices, it's really coming out of your general fund.
And actually, we've spent 90% of it, right? We're at 90%.
Right. So the money's already
Yeah, we
out
spent,
there.
We're going to be out at $470,000 at the end of this project.
So it isn't like we got to go and find the money. We've already spent it.
Correct.
Okay. Mr.
So
Massey?
it's just spotted throughout the budget?
No, it's the general fund. So if you think about our general fund balance, we have a balance in there, and it's just general fund balance. The board mandates that we keep 12 to 15% of a balance for the general fund, 12 to 15% of expenses. And so it's that balance. And last year when we finished out the year, we came in under budget again, like usual. And so when you look at what was available in the excess, we ended up with about 21% of our general fund expenses available to that general fund balance. So in order to bring it back down, so it's the excess reserves of general fund.
Thanks for that clarification.
So rest assured it won't come out of clerk's budget. Mr. Massey?
Yeah, Superintendent, are you sure that $500,000 will satisfy what you have in mind?
I mean, this is really up to the board. What I wanted to do in bringing this forward was really to show you that you have options. You don't always have to bond these projects, especially the smaller projects. I mean, you could set up a $2 million revolving fund. I would advise against it, and I think I just made Treasurer Guzak nervous. But in reality, the $500,000, I just picked that as a threshold because it met with Concord Green. And I think that's kind of a threshold for you guys to consider the smaller projects of being $500,000 or less, being prime examples of great projects to fund through a revolving fund.
So our general fund, we try to keep that between 12 and 15%. So really the $500,000 doesn't have a great effect on that 12 to 15%. If we get up in the millions, then it starts to have a drastic effect on it.
Well, this will be established as a special standalone fund. It will be you're going to establish it now, but like I said, those funds have already been committed because we haven't bonded this project
Right.
yet. We've already taken it out of the general fund to pay the invoices as they came due. So you really have already committed this money. Now, of course, you can bond it, you can start that bond process right now. You can still bond this project, and then that $500,000 or $470,000 will come back to us. We'll replenish the general fund, and again, this isn't something you have to do. It's just to provide you guys with an option to help residents with the smaller projects.
One question that hasn't occurred that I just thought of, but let's say that we had $1 million revolving fund, and for some reason 4 or 5 years the economy goes south. Can we bond it at that point?
No.
Or no?
Yeah, you're not going to be able to, I don't think you'll be able to do that once you've,
No.
Once you've entered
once
into
you've
it.
basically made the commitment to this, I don't think you're going to be able to
All
switch
right.
around.
Yeah, I did talk to Roger, our bond attorney, about that. He says normally it's 18 months is when you can do it. He said on this one, it would be next August, because we've been in this process so long with Concord Green, because basically it was almost finished last year. So if we wanted to bond this one back out, we'd have to do it next August.
By next August.
By next August. Any other project, once we get the 8 years in or whatever, you've got 18 months to bond it. Otherwise, it's done. You can't touch
Okay.
it.
All right. That's good to know. Okay.
Scott,
Yes, Mr. Thomas. I'm sorry.
with this $500,000, correct me if I'm wrong, but if before we discuss this resolving credit, that $500,000 would go to pay off unfunded liability.
The 5%, you mean, or
No, the 500,000.
all that we're towards that's in the general fund?
There would, if the bonds were through, and if we went and rebonded it, the 500,000 we would use at the end of the fiscal budget would have gone to pay off the OPEB, not OPEB, but the unfunded liability. Am I correct, Superintendent?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends on the board. I mean, your actions are exactly right. We've been, our mandate from the board is that to aggressively go after OPEB or defined benefit pension plan with the police department. So that's what we've done with excess general fund balance every single year, is we take it back down to the 15% board mandated limit, and whatever that extra is has gone towards paying the unfunded liability. So Trustee Thomas is correct in saying that if we bond this project and it comes back to us, the board has taken that action. If you recall, like this past year, we set $1 million aside for OPEB based upon the 21% reserves that we had in the general fund balance. We said, look, we can spend down $1 million. Let's spend that $1 million on OPEB. We still have that ability. So this $500,000, if he bonds it, if you guys decided to bond it now, would come back into the general fund to pay us back for the expenditures we've already had. It would end up in our excess fund balance again when we brought it back down next year after our audit. Whatever the additional was, unless the board, you could direct it wherever you want at that time, but again, the board's mandate up till now has been to spend unfunded liabilities.
So what would be the cost benefit analysis, roughly? Is it better to use money to pay down OPEB or to earn 5% interest? I don't know, what the OPEB is costing us, or
just remember that you're carrying balance in the general fund regardless, right?
Right.
And this gives you an opportunity to get 4% back on it. It's really to look at. You're carrying that balance, and are you getting more than 4%? And then doing this would be a dumb idea, but are you earning more than 4% of the balance you're carrying? No, you're not. So this gives you more investment income. You're sure you're locking it down for a potentially 10-year project on this, but it gives you more investment income than you're earning on the balance you're carrying right now.
okay,
3% or 300 times.
right, Mr. Atkins?
Is this proposed as part of the 2019 budget?
In the 2019 budget, when you look through there, you'll see that we have the bond costs calculated in there for Concord Green, because the board had not taken an action to set up the revolving fund yet. I had to put the 2019 budget together as if we're going to bond it, which was with the resolution that the board has already passed. If the board takes this action to create this and decides that Concord Green is going to be the first recipient of the township's revolving fund on Thursday, then we'll revise that budget to reflect that in the next version of the budget that you receive.
Mr. Thomas?
So with this $500,000 out of the budget, because we really don't have, we already spent it basically, 490 of it, correct, right?
We don't have all the invoices in, but yeah, we've been paying invoices out of.
And then what are, just best guess estimate, what are we gonna have left over to pay off the OPEB, unfunded liability?
But we still have $1 million.
We just did
assigned to
extreme.
OPEB to pay it for 2018.
Okay, Mr. Atkins?
I don't know, I mean, we'll obviously figure it out Thursday, but I'm just having a hard time with it. Just seems like a lot of money to tie up for a very small amount of return over a long period of time.
Well, 4 or 5% is pretty good compared to what we're getting. What are we getting on our other investments?
One,
No,
to two.
no, I've got some as high as 213, you know, and then all the CDs are coming up. I've been working with the banks and
Yeah,
you know, someone want to know I'm getting better rates because I say, well, I can get this right here, you
We're
know, and
averaging
they'll
what?
match it because, you know, why, I can move it over real easy. I just transfer it, and so I'm getting banks to all come up. And there's one that's been driving it all, which helps out. I don't care who's driving it, as long as I can say, well, this, I can get this, and then so I've got all of them coming up, and a couple of them have increased.
But we've been averaging about 1.5, right?
Yeah, 1.5, yeah, probably.
I just look at the roads list that we talked about a few meetings ago, of road repairs that need to be done. You know, I think there's a lot of projects that need to be done. And then you start thinking about small projects and tying up a large amount of money for some small subdivision projects. I'd kind of like to see what our priority list is for the larger road repairs based off the phaser rating we seen 4 or 5 meetings ago, and how that's going to be funded or discussed.
Well, and what I think it was our previous board, basically, part of what, I don't know if it was a written policy, I don't believe it was, I think it was just a informal policy that was that we were not going to take over the road commission's responsibility of paying for paving any of the roads, that it was going to be the responsibility of the county. Now, we get an allocation from the county, which is basically them saying, hey, here's some money that you can elect to spend with us in the township. And, you know, typically we do that, but we also have to match it. And it's 50-50 money is what they call it, but we basically have to come up with matching dollars, which they're telling us that those dollars are going to increase significantly, and I'm sure Mr. Limita wants to mention something along those lines, so go ahead, Mr. Limita.
So in the budget, we haven't allocated anything other than the $60,000 for roads, $20,000 for crack sealing, and $60,000 for match funds, because we've been instructed by the board every year that that's it. We're not to expend any more money, so there's no difference in the 2019 budget. We're still budgeted for exactly the same. We have heard informally that the road commission may increase our 50-50 matching funds from the 60 up to $186,000 for next year to start spurring more action on local roads. Again, no subdivision roads get paved with those. It's just for local roads. But I don't have anything formally from there, so I'm not gonna, I didn't make that proposal. And again, we've been specifically instructed, 2 years ago, we put additional funds in to try to accomplish a little bit more with the roads, and the board overruled it and had us take it back out. The superintendent's recommendation was to put additional funds in, and the board had us take it back down to the $60,000. That the only money that we were gonna allocate towards roads was the 50-50 allocation. So we've continued to operate on that board's instruction or board directive until you guys, as a board, if you want to change that, that's up to you during this 2019 budget process. If you want to allocate additional funds towards roads, then that's, again, a directive that you would have to provide to us.
Okay. Mr. Thomas?
I'd like to get a consensus that at the last meeting of this month, the 25th, that we talk about allocation of funds for 50-50 matches in this year's budget as one of our Thursday end of the meeting big picture aspects. And I'd also like to discuss future positioning, and I'd also like to discuss the police millage.
Okay.
just like to add one more thing.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Atkins.
I just think, we are the economic powerhouse of the county, and I don't know if we, need to, maybe we don't have any more strings to pull with the county than we already do, but based on that, you don't want to leave money on the table with the county, because they're, forming the DDA, getting money back into our township is great, and I think whatever they're willing to match for roads, you should take every dime of it, match every dime of it. And I think if we sit back and wait, I don't see the county or the road commission putting forth very much effort to make huge improvements in roads, and I think we could be waiting here for another decade before we see anything like that. So I think it's important to look at those dollars.
Well, not to get off on a tangent, but with regard to roads, I understand it's a top priority for our residents, or one of the top priorities, is that their streets and roads are in horrible shape throughout Michigan, actually. It's not just our township. And I see signs of improvement with our county road commission. Number one, there's a new chairperson for the road commission, and she's the former supervisor for Atlas Township, and Shirley Kautman Jones, and I believe she has really made a huge difference in the operation already. They've hired a new director, Fred Pavandi, and Mr. Pavandi and the board are working together to do a lot of things, and they're strategizing as to how they go about using the money. I guess, one of the things that I'd like to have a discussion with our county commission is about taking some of they have a surplus, a significant surplus at this point. I would like to have a discussion with them about what they're allocating towards the road commission, because it's my understanding that most road commissions get money from their county, not just the state and federal government like ours, but that the county actually allocates money to the road commission.
Really?
And I guess I would like to, and I've heard that our county does not, and so
They don't.
And so I would like to ask the question, why aren't we? I don't know, I've heard the figure of $30 million surplus, but I'm not sure of that figure, but I would like to see, in fact, what the details are on, and we can ask that question. But I would rather see those dollars going into roads rather than taking general fund money and putting more of our resources into it. When you look at our taxes, and one of the things that I remind people, even when we got people responding to the truth in taxation issue, saying, hey, I heard you're going to raise our taxes, and I tell them, no, that's not true. We're not raising taxes. And then point out to them that only 17% of the taxes that they pay on their home stay in Grand Blanc Township to run our government. The majority of the taxes go to the county, go to schools, what have you, which is great. I mean, our voters have approved that. But if we're looking at taking our tax dollars and using them for things, it should be things that they're not already paying for, in my opinion, and they're already paying for roads. I agree with matching the 50-50 money, but if we're looking for extra money, I think we need to ask the county for more. And the road commission divvies their money up. It's based on miles of road, population, what have you. They have a formula. They divide it up amongst all the municipalities. But the county, I'm wondering if they could give more to the road commission. We do have a major road project, 2 of them actually in our township, that will begin next year. We've got Hill Road that is going to be rebuilt from Fenton Road to Saginaw Street, or Dort Highway, I guess, to Dort. And then we also have the Dort Extension. That's a $13 million project that'll start next summer. So there are some major expenditures that the county is making in our neighborhood here, but we certainly understand that we need more. So anyways, but we can discuss those issues at the end of the month and see where we want to go.
One other question on that.
Yes.
If you've heard, to Superintendent Lemata, if it's just conversation that they may, the county, the road commission may be increasing that, do they send something out formally that says is there a procedure, like a certain time of the year you get that, or?
We'll get it before the end of the year as they're putting their budget together right now as well.
Okay.
So we'll get something from them, a confirmation, but I can't tell you when that's gonna happen. They just said that the talks that they're having right now are talking about increasing it, ours, up to as much as $186,000. Which would be fantastic. It's the 50-50 match money, and yeah, it's gonna require us to come up with another $126,000, but we can get quite a bit more road projects done in that kind of a match.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know if any of you have driven over to Pollock Road, but they actually did a little bit more than what we had anticipated. They had extra asphalt, and so
They kept on going.
actually received a couple of pleasant phone calls asking me, what in the world are they doing? They're going a lot further than what they said they were. And so that's a pleasant surprise. Anything else on this revolving fund that we want to talk about?
No, I don't want to do it.
Okay. Well, we'll talk further on Thursday on that. So you have the information to consider the options. Item G, the board will consider a motion to grant approval of NCG Trillium Theater request for a liquor license. Mr. Laddie or Mr. Lehman, would you like to present that?
Key it up and then you can have it. Okay. We got a request from the attorney firm Fahey Schultz, representing NCG Trillium Theater, asked for board's approval of a liquor license for the theater in Grand Blanc Township. I did turn their packet of information over to Chief Wiles, who had one of the officers go through to do due diligence like we always do with one of these requests. It came back from the police department with they don't see any reasons why that wouldn't be granted. It really has to do, if you walk in from that side with the small parking lot, which is facing towards Holly, if you walk in there, you see that overflow concession area. That's what they're talking about, turning that into a bar area. One of the only twists on this is that they're asking for one of your available liquor licenses that you have for Grand Blanc Township. You currently have 5. They're asking for one of them, so basically you'd be granting them a free liquor license out of one of your 5. They are going through this exact same process with 2 other theaters in the area, and I don't know if there weren't any available to ask for them for free, but I did hear back from the police department that those ones, they purchased those liquor licenses from another locale and brought those in. But maybe they didn't have any available. They saw that we had 5. So I think before the board, one of the things that you really need to consider about this is, number one, granting them whether you want the theater to have alcohol available for sale as they try to turn it into more of an entertainment venue than just the theater. The second thing is whether you want to grant them one of your available 5 liquor licenses. So I would think that the board needs to think about what they would do with those 5 to spur development based upon our population. Clearly, we've got Tech Village going on, potentially the Genesis outlot build out for, you know, a restaurant there. Certainly there's still available space in front of Trillium for additional restaurants, which was ideally where it was thought of back when it started. You know, and so if you guys walk through in your minds where you think that those potential 5 could go and whether that makes sense as being one of them, I think those are the questions before you, David.
No, I agree, exactly. It's sort of a 2-step analysis for you, deciding whether or not you think a liquor license is appropriate at the theater, and then whether you want to give up one of your 5 allocated Class C licenses.
I think one of the things too that along with that is I often hear from people that, you know, if we took the issue of tax abatements, that you have, you know, existing businesses and then you get a new business coming to the area and we're going to grant them a tax abatement because they're coming to our area, but you have people that have been paying their taxes all along and they're wondering, well, why don't I get that same break? Trillium has been in our community for how many years?
Since the 80s.
At least. I'd say probably 15 years. I know it's
Oh,
been
at
at least 15 years.
Yeah, 15.
They bought into our community 15 years ago and believed in us. That, I think, should be considered as well. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I'm just saying as a factor that they've believed in the township 15, 16, maybe longer years and paid their taxes. And I think it's a reputable business in our community, and they've operated a tight ship, and it's actually, I think, brings people to our community. Mr. Thomas?
I just want to know, how many liquor licenses do we get a year? I know it's by population, but are we getting ready to get another one?
We had that discussion this morning. We figure that, I mean, it's based on a formula that involves our population as well. And we were trying to figure out if it's every 10 years, if it's every 5 years, if we're on some sort of schedule with liquor control. We couldn't put our hands on the answer.
Who would have that answer, Mr. Laddie? What agency? Would that be the Liquor Control Commission?
The liquor control would be able to
Yes.
tell us, or Ms. Lane may be able to contact them and find out what their schedule is.
Well, I happen to know that it happened the last time we got some increased Class C licenses because of our 2010 census. And then we have to live with those until we get the next result from the
Would you be able to verify that,
2020.
Ms. Lane, with the Liquor Control Commission,
Sure.
how that works? And
Okay.
I think if we could have that information for Thursday, that'd be optimal, but, so that we can put that to rest as to how many we get and when we get allocated. Okay.
Sure.
Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, my only concern is, the liquor license is kind of your ace in the hole that is a hot commodity. As you look at, residents, when you talk to them about some of the things they'd like to see come to the area, aside from some of the grocery store chains that we hear, is higher end restaurants. You look at sports bars, Bar Louie, or a 4 or 5 star steakhouse. That may make the difference if they come come here, or if they go back down to Fenton or back into Oakland County. And we don't really have much of that to offer countywide. So, 5 of them sound like a lot, and I know there's nothing, immediately on the horizon.
Ms. Lane, one of the things, if you could check also when you're checking on how many we get allocated, maybe they can tell us how many liquor licenses in Genesee County are in escrow at this time. What happens with the liquor license when a facility closes? For example, we've had one just a couple buildings down that closed this year. Their liquor license, if they don't sell it to another entity within Genesee County, goes into the escrow. The Liquor Control Commission you can place your license in escrow for a certain number of years until you can find a buyer for it, or you reopen somewhere else, what have you. And so if we found out how many are in escrow in Genesee County. The other thing that's changed in recent years with the liquor license as well is that in the past, every community, they had to come before a board really to get approved. That no longer has to happen. And also you had to keep those liquor licenses within your township or your community. That doesn't happen anymore. Now I could go and buy a liquor license in Montrose and bring it to Grand Blanc if it's within the same county. So that makes it a little bit more flexible for businesses to be able to locate here, just so you know that those aren't the only 5 licenses that are available to a high-end restaurant that would want to move into the area. You're able to move those things around now, which makes it a little bit more accessible. So, but we could see how many are in escrow, and that'd give you an idea.
Thousands.
So,
Hey, Scott.
and the business has changed in that a business cannot make it really just on alcohol any longer. They have to have other activities going on.
Can you
Yes.
educate me on ABC liquor license, or what is it, C liquor?
Can you what?
Educate me or us.
There's different classes of liquor license. Some are takeout, some are on premise. Tasting rooms, there's, several different things you can.
So C
Yeah.
would be for restaurants and bars and hard liquor and beer and wine?
Right.
You can get beer and wine, you can get liquor, you can get takeout, you can get on premise.
That's for a C.
And
But our license is a C. Ours does have hard liquor, right? The one, the
I don't know what they're requesting.
You're
This
asking
is a
for a
Class
C.
C,
Okay.
Right.
a
And
Class
we have
C.
C's,
Hard
right?
liquor.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have 5 C licenses.
Which would be on premise, beer, wine,
Yes.
liquor.
So somebody down in
And
Fenton
on
could
Sundays.
sell their liquor license to someone that wants to open up 3Gs again.
Right.
Or-
Yeah.
Used to be able to buy them out of Detroit.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you gotta stay within the same county, but,
Right, it's
um,
a price war if somebody wants to pay whatever the price is of an escrow.
What does a Class C license go for?
depends on the county.
Genesee.
I couldn't tell you, but,
30 or 40,000.
yeah, that's roughly what I've been hearing from people.
And ours is free.
Well, and there's other communities that have free ones too. I mean, we aren't the only one.
I do not absolutely have a issue with them serving beer at the movie theater. I've gone to the one in, what is it, Bridgeport or Birch Run? It's pretty nice, and I don't have an issue with that, but I'm with Trustee Atkins about, you know, that's a really big caveat for a restaurant coming in. But that's just fascinating. I'd love to find out how many of these licenses are and how many we're gonna get next cycle, because I'm sure our census number in 2020 is gonna be greater than 10. No?
The what?
Mr. Thomas is indicating that he thinks there's going to be a big jump in our population in 2020, and at this point I disagree. I was going through some records, and
From 10.
no, I was looking at the statistics for the top 20 townships by population, and we're number 17 using the 2010 census, but in their record, they showed we had dropped to maybe 36,500 since 2010. And that is a record that was being based on statewide consistently throughout, so.
We have issued over 600 residential building permits in the last 5 years.
Right, so we're gonna.
And if
be
there's 2
higher.
people living in each one, there's 1,200 right there,
Bang up.
plus apartment buildings and what have you. So we'll wait to see, but
I'll get
we'll
the
make our decision
information.
based on some facts. Okay,
Glad to do
so
that.
we'll have a few things to consider on that liquor license. And then item H will be to go through the performance evaluation of superintendent for this past year. We'll do that in open session. Mr. Laddie?
The performance evaluation, if Mr. Limita chooses, will be an open session, and then our discussion regarding compensation will be enclosed. So save yourself some time and energy for the end of the meeting tomorrow, or Thursday night, because.
Sounds like we're gonna be able to do that. Okay. With that,
I'd like to make a motion.
Wait, before you guys adjourn,
yes,
just in front of you all, you had the hard copies as promised. You have, in the blue is the general fund budgets. You've got the special revenue funds behind that, and then hot off the press was the 2019 Department of Public Works budget. There have been some minor changes in the general fund budget compared to the one that you received electronically. I personally prefer the hard copy as looking at it versus electronic. If you want the updated one electronically, let me know. We'll send it out to you. But typically, we'll make changes as we work through this over the next couple of months. And then then we'll finalize it. You'll get a final revised copy of the hard copy budget. This does include all of the department head narratives. So as you go through, you'll see my initial narrative that kind of sums everything up. And then by department, if we've been provided a narrative, it's also included in there. There's some personnel information as far as a head count and number of employees, that kind of thing, any changes from year over year. The one change that was made from the electronic version that you received earlier that I think is important is Chief Wiles had indicated in his narrative that he had 42 sworn officers and was requesting 3, and I had cut that back. So the electronic version you got took it down, but in this version we updated it back up because you actually had 43 sworn officers, not 42, and so I ended up cutting one more position than I should have, so you would have lost a patrol officer. That's been reinstated as of this morning, so this version is actually showing my true superintendent's recommendation of personnel in the police department. So there is a difference. So if you're trying to compare them from the electronic version to this version, there is a difference. But please take your time, read the narratives as you go through that were provided by the department heads. Go through and take a look at where we're at. We do want to schedule 3 meetings initially for board members to just kind of a drop-in session from 4 to 7. I'm going to ask the board on Thursday to provide me those dates, preferably at the last week of September or beginning of October, if it works for you guys. But we'd love to be able to do it from that 4 to 7. We could certainly do one the first of your meeting from 4 to 7 before the meeting of the 25th, since you'd be scheduled to be here anyway. And I'd like to have 2 more dates picked at least after that. So on Thursday, if you guys look at your schedules, think about when you think you'll be comfortable coming in and having conversations with department heads. We will have all the department heads here from 4 to 7. We just want to make sure that we're going to have board members coming in to have those conversations with any questions they may have by department.
Can you send out a calendar with your suggested dates? That might be easier. And say, okay, these are the ones, instead of us saying which ones we want to see.
I think it's probably easier for us since we're here to be here, but I mean, I can send out 3 dates. I just don't know you guys' schedules.
I've got a suggestion. Let's use the, I don't know if I know Dennis is familiar with the app. It's called Doodle.
Yep.
It will allow us to place on it's real easy. You just click on the link, you'll put your email address in, and you click on which dates and times will work for you. And you can see everybody else what times and dates work for them.
Okay.
And then we'll give everybody a week to do that, or a few days, and we will see what works for everybody. And that way it makes it a lot easier rather than emailing back and forth and all this. We just go to that website, you click on what dates and times will work, and Mr. Limita and Ms. Gilman can schedule a little bit easier, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect suggestion. Supervisor Bennett, you'll get the email coming out from Megan. Gilman, just follow that, click the doodle, pick the dates that you can attend, and the ones that are the most popular, we'll schedule at least the initial 3, and then however many more we need to get to the board's comfort level after that, the department heads are willing to do whatever we need to do.
Ms. Lane?
Rather than have all the department heads here for all of those dates, why couldn't you develop with the 3 dates, whichever departments we're going to do, so that we're not shooting wildly, but we are concentrating on specific departments on specific dates and narrowing our focus?
We can. We want to make it available because I don't believe everybody's going to come in for all 3 dates. We're trying to make everyone available to every one of the board members. We've never scheduled this before. We're trying to make every effort to have all department heads here so you can really come in and do some one-stop shopping and get your questions answered. You can come back at the next one if you have more follow-up questions and get those questions answered. The department heads don't have a problem with being here. They are prepared and ready to have those conversations.
Okay, whichever way it works best, Mr. Lehman, that's fine. Okay, and Mr. Mansour probably will want a digital copy of it, but and I don't know, does anybody else want a digital copy of the updated version?
No, I do. I do not.
All right, the printed copy is good for me, but okay. Anything else?
I move the meeting be adjourned.
Support.
Okay, motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
I didn't want it to
Okay.
I didn't want it to die for lack of support.